Forward. Around the age of 15 or 16, my friend and I engaged in a hobby where we challenged each other in writing stories. While my friend remained devoted to the romantic genre, I was keen to experiment across various genres, finding myself drawn to novels, detective stories, and fantasy tales at different times. One of my greatest challenges stemmed from growing up in a bilingual family. Speaking Russian with my mother and Georgian with my father led me to think in both languages simultaneously. This ability to process one sentence in Russian and the next in Georgian complicated my writing process and hindered my ability to write cohesively. I recall a specific instance when I sat down to write and an inner voice suggested a title: The Heart of an Angel. Compelled by this inspiration, I wrote down the title but found myself fixated on the blank page, puzzled about the story's direction. How does one begin writing when the title is clear but the story is not? Ideas eluded me, and my confidence in my creative abilities waned. I concluded that I lacked the imagination and talent necessary for writing, and subsequently abandoned the endeavor. Life steered me away from writing, leading me down a vastly different path. However, as I began to pen my memoirs, the content became clear to me, and when it came to selecting a title, the choice was unmistakable. This book could only be named The Heart of an Angel. The book, Gnosis, or The Heart of an Angel, was inspired by spiritual beings, masters who are part of the hierarchy of light, guardians of human evolution. My connection with them has been present since childhood, though I was initially unaware of their identities. This relationship manifested in two primary ways: through dreams and through telepathic visual contact during altered states of consciousness, often at the threshold between sleeping and waking. Gnosis, or The Heart of an Angel, explores these interactions and the guidance they provided. This book comprehensively addresses the major challenges seekers might encounter on their journey of spiritual growth. It is important to note that the book's purpose is not to alter beliefs or values, but to share the story of my spiritual journey. The writing process spanned approximately 2 years. As I approached its completion, realizing that the content warranted a broader audience, despite its diary-like format and intimate revelations, the idea of publication emerged. Initially, I contemplated a print release. However, my enthusiasm waned under the subtle discouragement of my spiritual guides. A pivotal telepathic message from my spiritual teacher emerged, suggesting, "You yourself do not yet fully understand what you have written." Acknowledging their insight, I recognized that the insights I shared lacked cohesion in my own understanding. Consequently, I was guided to gradually release the book's chapters online, engaging directly with readers' queries. This led to the creation of the Gnosis group in Facebook. My group consisted of diverse individuals. I shared much in common with some members, while feeling markedly different from others. Despite these differences, I was responsible for responding to everyone, as long as their comments were phrased as questions. If I overlooked a question, my spiritual mentors would gently remind me. I sensed they were also monitoring the types of questions that arose and assessing my responses. They paid close attention to how this information integrated into the participants' mental frameworks. Over time, I received a suggestion to incorporate certain questions and answers into my book. This edition aimed to clarify numerous complex issues for future readers. Thus, my book evolved into a collaborative effort, enriched by the collective insights of many. Esotericists recognize that a book possesses both informational and energetic dimensions. Informationally, the topics within this book oscillate among discussions of the underworld, intermediate realms, and high spiritual worlds, creating a dynamic pattern of ascents and descents, much like waves. Energetically, it alternates between engaging with low vibrational fields and high vibrational ones. However, the overall vibrational quality of the book remains elevated, thanks to the involvement of spiritual hierarchs and their energetic contributions. As a result, readers might experience varied reactions, such as an accelerated heartbeat, drowsiness, or an unexpected burst of energy. The book is divided into 4 parts: memories, this side of the bridge, over the bridge, and summary. With the exception of memories, the chapters in the subsequent sections are presented in a diary format, chronicling contemporary events, and include excerpts from my online posts that were made during the publication of this book on the internet. The first 2 parts are tailored for readers aligned with the traditional Christian egregore, offering a sense of familiarity. In contrast, the latter 2 parts venture beyond the confines of traditional religious perspectives, delving into esoteric knowledge in a manner accessible and credible to a broad audience. From my observations, those not internally prepared for the last 2 sections find themselves naturally gravitating towards the first 2. Every event detailed in this book has truly occurred, and every word is penned with a commitment to truth, to the best of my understanding of the concept. Part 1. Light in Darkness. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Gospel of John. Childhood. From a young age, I existed in 2 worlds: the tangible reality of my waking life and the vivid realm of my dreams, where 2 independent lives ran parallel to each other. Occasionally, these worlds would intersect, allowing me to experience dreams during wakefulness and foresee future events in my sleep. This ability, which first emerged in my childhood, became more refined and developed over time. Growing up, my companions were exclusively boys, simply a circumstance of my environment. I'm not sure whether I gravitated toward this situation or if it chose me. Likely there were no girls my age in my neighborhood. Thus, my early childhood was spent roaming the streets of Sololaki, district in Tbilisi, Georgia, exploring attics and scaling the roofs of old houses with my brother and his friends. Dolls never piqued my interest, a fact that worried my parents, who feared for my maternal instincts' development. Relatives and my parents' friends often likened me to a German porcelain doll, a comparison that irritated me deeply. In the face of their cooing adorations, I could only respond with a scowl. How could they compare me, a child who crafted her own slingshot, shot far and aimed well, to a fragile porcelain doll? It was with our slingshots that we unwittingly sacrificed the beautiful stained glass windows of our neighborhood. We were the quintessential Italian courtyard kids, adored by the residents of the top floors and not so favored by those living on the ground level. The latter couldn't see our mischief, which worked in our favor. Our spirited and untamed nature mirrored that of the scruffy tabby cats roaming the streets of Sololaki, an old district in Tbilisi. These cats were a constant in our daily adventures, capturing them, forcibly petting them until they were dazed, and then releasing them was an art form in itself. So was the skill of dodging and hiding from the ground floor neighbors, who were often the unwitting victims of our antics, whether it was our ball landing in their soup or their homes filling with smoke from our homemade smoke bombs. we always found ways to elude their frustration. After a day filled with such escapades, we were always greeted by the unwavering smile of a mother who was utterly convinced her children were nothing short of angels. We did our utmost to maintain this illusion. Now, as adults, when I see parents fretting over their child's misbehavior, I can't help but turn a blind eye, pretending not to grasp their concerns. After all, the mischief of today's youth pales in comparison to the antics we got up to back then. I was particularly fond of our rooftop games. In Sololaki, the houses are interconnected by their roofs, creating an aerial street of sorts. We alone knew the secrets of navigating these heights safely, how to tread on the old attic floors without causing damage, where to step where the roof tiles adhered firmly to avoid bending them, and how to enter a neighboring attic, identifying which roof plate was broken or which attic door was left ajar. I vividly recall the mysterious allure of Sololaki's attics, filled with dust and the scent of cats, home to myriad forgotten treasures from bygone eras. We could spend hours examining these relics, pondering over who left them there and why, in such a forsaken place. While my friends engaged in mock battles with sticks on the rooftops, I preferred to sit quietly, gazing at the sky. From atop the roof, the entirety of the old city sprawled before me, like a map laid out in the palm of a hand. I could watch the swallows darting through the air indefinitely, their erratic flight enhancing the vastness of the space around me, and with it, a sense of freedom. But what is this freedom that eludes so many in the modern world, interpreted so differently by each individual? For some, it's about breaking free from societal norms through unconventional or even shocking actions. For others, it's a bulwark against the tide of external influences, a way to safeguard cultural or national identity. And for some, escapism through substance use offers a reprieve from reality. For me, freedom was found in watching the swallows from the rooftops of Sololaki. Perhaps freedom is an innate aspect of our souls, an invisible presence within each of us, calling us to distant realms and reminding of our origins. My understanding of freedom began with those swallows, as compelling and tangible as the sky above Sololaki, alive with their presence. During the summer, we would sometimes visit my Russian grandmother in Podolsk, Russia, or spend time with my Georgian grandmother in Tel Aviv, Georgia. I recall one summer in Tel Aviv distinctly. It was an ordinary evening with the adults gathered on the porch for dinner, engaging in what seemed to me endless discussions on boring topics. My brother and I lay nearby, making futile attempts to swat away the persistent mosquitoes. My father, a respected figure as a doctor of biology, a professor, and later an academician, held the highest authority in my eyes. I used to believe he was knowledgeable about every conceivable topic. I remember him explaining at the dinner table how a living cell is a marvel of creation. And then he said something that instantly captured my attention. He suggested that a living cell, with its complexity and perfection, could not have come into existence by itself. Perhaps, he mused, there exists an absolute intelligence responsible for such perfect creations. This conversation occurred during the Soviet era, a time when the concept of God was neither mentioned nor discussed. Curious and eager to ponder my father's words further, I dashed out to the yard. Despite the pitch darkness, I navigated with ease, bending each tree branch out of my way until I reached a plum tree near the house. From there, I climbed to the roof, making my way to the highest point on the slate. I wanted to deeply consider my father's statement. Lying there, gazing at the moon and stars through the branches of a mulberry tree. The visible sky soon vanished from my view. My thoughts ventured into the vast expanse of space, devoid of moon or stars, and the deeper I delved, the more immense, warmer, and familiar it became. Perhaps it was that summer which left me with my first memorable dream, a dream whose profound truth, I believe, has yet to be fully realized in my life. In this dream, demons confronted me. I fought back with immense strength, attacking with the ferocity of a tiger and the might of a bear. I could even breathe fire like a monstrous creature. However, the more aggressively I fought, the larger and stronger these demons grew. I was astounded to find that my efforts to combat them only amplified their power. Then, it dawned on me that in this dreamscape, the laws were inverted compared to our material world. In our reality, violence might suppress violence, but here violence only begot more violence and could only be quelled by its antithesis. Years later, a phrase I read in the Gospel resonated with this epiphany. Strength is made perfect in weakness. Transformed back into my original youthful form, I stood before these towering demons as a small and defenseless girl, yet I felt an immense inner power. A serene peace filled my heart. The demons' attempts to strike me were futile. Their blows passed through me as if I were ethereal, causing no harm. Gradually, they weakened and vanished. Behind me, I sensed the presence of someone. I couldn't see them, but their presence was unmistakable. This dream, perhaps, was the first lesson that unveiled to me a fundamental principle of the spiritual realm, or maybe it served as a reminder of truths deeply inscribed in the soul's unreachable dimensions, truths we have meticulously forgotten. It wasn't until I was about 15, some 8 or 9 years later, that I read the Gospel. The passage that resonated with me the most was where the Savior teaches us to turn the other cheek if someone strikes us, and if someone takes our cloak, to offer our shirt as well. It was then that I recalled my dream, and the full meaning of those words became clear to me. In the spiritual realm, violence is quelled only by a force of opposite nature, no matter how odd such actions may appear in our material world. I came to understand that there are invisible threads weaving the spiritual and material worlds together. What occurs in the spiritual realm is primary, shaping and influencing the events we experience in our material existence. Michael often reminded me to break free from thinking in purely material terms. Through these reflections, I grasped the pitiful state of those lacking spiritual vision, the sorry condition of beings who only see and live in reflections, abiding by the laws of reflection. Such individuals never comprehend the true nature of events, continually erring, and as a result, perpetually sinning. Sin further obscures spiritual perception, trapping them in a vicious cycle of rebirth. It continues until enlightened souls, willing to sacrifice their spiritual gains, elevate humanity's consciousness to a spiritual plane. Who are these children of light? Who knows their names or who shall ever thank them? Invisible spiritual masters. Since that summer, I've been acutely aware of the unseen presences beside me, spiritual guides who have directed me throughout my life. To me, this connection seemed natural, never once prompting doubt. Still, I sensed that sharing about this bond with others, including my parents and closest friends, might not be wise. These spiritual guides sometimes cautioned me against certain readings, and I heeded their advice as if hearkening to an inner moral compass. For instance, during the 90s, when magic became a popular intrigue, they dissuaded me from exploring it, despite my deep fascination. They also advised against diving into particular esoteric texts as I grew older and developed a passion for science, which later became my profession. They signaled me to abandon career ambitions. During my university days, I discovered an uncanny ability to understand and even influence people's psyches. While I considered this skill a potent tool to wield over my unsuspecting peers, my spiritual guide stepped in, sternly advising against such manipulation. These profound directives from them were most pronounced during pivotal moments in my journey. See through my eyes. Feel through my heart. Growing up, my dreams were increasingly haunted by demonic entities. The carefree spirit of my youth had waned, and I found myself unable to return to that once joyful state. In these nightmares, a paralyzing dread would grip me, rendering me feeble and uncertain. Mornings often began with me feeling drained and devoid of life. The dreams typically unfolded in similar settings, albeit with varying details. I saw bodiless demonic entities weaving through crowds, thriving on human negativity. Some latched onto unsuspecting individuals, spurring a surge of destructive thoughts and emotions from which these entities fed. Aware of my ability to see them, they targeted me with loathing and fury. Their intense animosity was always shocking. If they passed through my body, a chilling weakness would overcome me. My only recourse was to force myself awake, though the dreams would resume if I dared to sleep again. Around the ages of 15 to 16, after immersing myself in the gospel, I began to utter prayers during these attacks and found that I could manipulate the course of my dreams. It was then that I recognized the profound strength of prayer. Reciting any Christian prayer caused the demonic figures to vanish. Even Christian symbols agitated them. The power of prayer and the sign of the cross brought temporary respite, allowing me to awaken. But I often had to continue praying for a considerable time. I would recite the entirety of my prayer book until the atmosphere in my room felt cleansed and secure for sleep. These encounters persisted for nearly 2 decades, during which I grew intimately familiar with the nature and hierarchy of these beings. Just as our world has simpler organisms like bacteria and viruses, and more complex ones like mammals and humans, so it is with demons. The lesser ones often dwell within human auras, sapping energy, and sometimes inducing illness. Then there are the formidable dark souls, intelligent and mighty. A lone individual stands little chance against their manipulative force. They can mentally devastate a person. I hesitate to delve further into this topic for now, but I will say this. Even these formidable beings are rendered impotent against the divine energy of Christ himself. To put it plainly, humans are not the apex of the food chain. There exist entities that prey on us, feeding off our energy. Emotions and thoughts, as forms of energy, are never wasted. They always serve a purpose. Everything, in essence, becomes sustenance for something else. Beyond our sensory limits lies a veiled world where we are not hunters, but the hunted. These revelations brought me closer to Christ. I developed a profound appreciation for the power of prayer and positive thinking. If malevolent entities thrive on negativity, then surely positive energy is the sustenance of higher, benevolent forces. This positive energy, channeled through our prayers and good deeds, must be important for the best connection with them. I then decided to make Christ a part of my life. I began sharing all the positive experiences I had with him in my thoughts, sending him this joy as bright energy. I resolved to dedicate all the good in my life to him. Whether it was the beauty of nature or the thrill of skiing, I invited him to experience these pleasures through me. The wonder of nature, the sweetest sounds, and the scents of spring and fresh grass. These were no longer mine alone, but shared with him in spirit. The simple joy of my daughter's first tooth clicking against a spoon was not just my delight, but a shared celebration with him. I would often reach out with these words: see through my eyes, hear through my ears, feel with my heart. Take this light from my heart and let it shine in the darkness. All this unfolded within the realm of my imagination. I never truly believed that Christ could hear me. I thought my actions were solely for personal fulfillment, since communicating with him always brought me joy. It felt like I was bridging a gap in my life, despite the connection seemingly being one-sided. I refrained from burdening him with my troubles, aware of the immense negativity that was already reaching him through the prayers of countless people, many of whom were lamenting their problems and pleading for help. I don't know why, but I believe that by allowing him to experience beauty and joy through me, I could somehow protect him from this onslaught of negativity. Was I merely being naive in thinking this way? Years later, beset by illness and weighed down by medication, the time came when I was slumped on a couch, weary from constant sickness, and I would unexpectedly hear Jesus' words. Now it's your turn to see through my eyes and feel with my heart. In a moment, clarity illuminated my mind. Nothing in my surroundings altered, yet my perception transformed. I could appreciate the elegance with which the sunlight danced across the furniture and the reflections on the floor. I was struck by the realization that nothing was more beautiful than this very room and its array of colors. As I gazed around, every object, whether living or not, seemed infused with consciousness. Looking at the plants, I could perceive the life force pulsating within them. I recognized their uniqueness, and my affection for them deepened, as if they were dear friends. My son was playing in the room at the time. How could I possibly convey or describe the unearthly beauty that surrounded me, and the profound happiness that filled me? Alas, this state was fleeting, but it is an experience that I would carry with me for a lifetime. August 2001. The visit to the church. I was 6 months pregnant with my first child when we received news that my husband's mountaineer friend had not returned from Ushba, a mountain in the Caucasus. There had been no communication for some time, and my husband and his friends started forming a rescue party. Everyone had a bad feeling, and we all knew deep down that it wasn't a good sign. However, no one spoke of death, even though our suspicions later turned out to be true. I was worried about my husband and feared that something might happen during the rescue mission. The party of mountaineers swiftly got ready and departed with helicopter. I couldn't stop being nervous and decided to go to church with my mother, light a candle for the boys, and give their journey my blessing. In Lower Betlemy, close to my parents' home in Sololaki, lies a beautiful old church. We decided to go there, even though it was August and very hot. I was wearing linen pants and a strapped shirt, and getting to the church in the searing heat wasn't easy for a woman 6 months pregnant. Sweaty and tired, I finally made it to the churchyard, and despite the boiling heat, I covered my shoulders, wrapped a scarf around my waist, and covered my head in accordance with church rules. I always considered these rules to be silly, since my attire couldn't be considered provocative, and what else was necessary? I did what I did to avoid drawing attention and have some time to myself, but that wouldn't be the case. A priest was standing at the entrance to the church, who, as I thought, was there to oversee ladies' attire. He stopped me in the doorway and started preaching. According to him, I shouldn't conceal myself like this before entering the church, but I should be dressed this way at all times. He went on to say that walking outside in a strapped shirt and pants was equal to being indecent with every passing man. It could have been the pregnancy affecting my thoughts, but those words affected me deeply. I faintly remember the rest of his preachings. I recall him judging women's dressing and pointing out who was showing what. He also told a story of him in Russia. I don't know what preceded this tale, but apparently he was telling about the superiority of the Orthodox Church. He told a story. One day he was traveling on a bus in Russia, and a woman got sick and fainted in the bus. He didn't help the lady and told others not to as well. He first questioned the religious beliefs of the still-dazed woman, and only after making sure that she was Orthodox did he help her. I did not get the moral of this story at that time, and I still don't. I remember wishing for him not to curse me since I was pregnant. Once he let me go, I entered the church in relief and hid myself in a dark corner near the icon of Jesus Christ. Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't want my mother or anyone else to notice. I couldn't pray, nor could I light the candle. Teary-eyed, I was looking at the face of the Savior so close to me, yet I felt so alien in his temple. For 2 whole years after this story, I didn't go into a church. Even afterwards, for a very long time, I felt out of place in a church. There was this nagging feeling that I'm not where I should be, not doing what I should do, and of course I was always wearing pants. Years later, Michael will tell me, "You are very beautiful." While I'll appreciate the compliment, it will also cause some confusion. It reminds me of something a priest once said about women needing to cover their heads in church to avoid tempting the angels with their hair. The memory made me uneasy, and I hesitated before accepting Michael's words. He noticed my unease and chuckled softly. "We don't see people the way you see each other," he said. "We see their true nature. To us, people with kind souls are the most beautiful around, and no head covering can obscure that." Attempting to start a church life. In 2002, I made another attempt at starting a church life by attending St. Panteleimon Church in Vera district. I was determined to follow every rule, including fasting and attending Mass. However, the sheer number of people gathered there created such a suffocating environment that it was difficult to maintain an exalted state. My thoughts were consumed with trying not to step on anyone's feet, burn someone's hair with my candle, and find a breath of fresh air so I wouldn't faint. Even standing near the doorway didn't help, as I couldn't hear the Mass and felt alienated. Surprisingly, I noticed that people coming out of the Mass had happy expressions on their faces, in stark contrast to my tired gaze. Despite feeling guilty, I couldn't help but feel that attending Mass was an arduous task. I felt remorse that what came so easily to others was so difficult for me, and I constantly apologized in my prayers. One night I had a dream. I found myself standing near the church doors, observing people going in and out of the yard. An elderly man caught my attention. He was wearing old, faded clothes and looked like any other beggar who usually resided there. But as I looked into his eyes, I recognized Jesus within him. He gave me a friendly, kind smile, and warmth emanated from his gaze. The image quickly dissipated, and I found myself at a dining table with Christ sitting at the head. Others were present, telling him of their troubles. I also confided in him about my inability to uphold every church rule and apologized for praying at home instead of attending Mass. In response, he gave me marionette dolls and said, "Burn your marionettes yourself. Post in online group Gnosis. Sahasrara." In the realm of spirituality, Sahasrara is the crown chakra that resides at the apex of the skull, connected to the hypothalamus in the brain, representing the pinnacle of energetic centers. It is generally believed that the color of this chakra is violet, and in general, the colors of the chakras change from bottom to top as in the visible spectrum. The 7 primary colors vary from low-frequency red to high-frequency violet. Nevertheless, some yogis envision Sahasrara as vivid white or gold. The halo seen adorning the heads of saints symbolizes this concept precisely. This chakra opens the door to the spiritual realm, revealing our spiritual origin and higher truth. According to Vedas, love of God, or bhakti, is the only way to unlock this chakra. As far as I can tell, activating chakras can also be done artificially by ingesting biologically active substances. For instance, the third eye chakra is known to be particularly sensitive to neurostimulating hallucinogens. Additionally, practicing Kundalini yoga can also open up the chakras. However, various yogis maintain that the most genuine way to activate the chakras is by living a conscious, physical, mental, and emotional life. Once the soul and conscience reach a state of readiness, the chakras will open naturally. 2002, Sahasrara. I can't exactly remember when this happened. All I remember is that my daughter was still young and my son hadn't been born yet. I do recall it was a church holiday, the Sunday of Repentance to be exact. I had left my daughter with my mother and was home alone cleaning when it happened. As I was vacuuming, I caught a glimpse of a priest preaching on television about the significance of the day. Suddenly, I felt a jolt to my head, as if something or someone had hit me. The sensation was so strong and abrupt that I dropped the vacuum hose and froze in place. A strange thought entered my mind, and I muttered to myself out loud, "What am I doing here?" By here, I didn't mean my house, family, or even my country. The thought was much more encompassing than that. In that moment, I felt a powerful and surreal awareness that everything around me wasn't mine. This house, this place, this life, none of it belonged to me. My real home was somewhere else, and I must go back. It was as if I was an amnesiac who had suddenly remembered a forgotten past life. The feeling was so intense that it was unbearable. I needed to remember, but I couldn't. I ran to the icon of Christ, desperate for some kind of help. I stared at the icon with all my might, hoping that it would bring me clarity. Tears streamed down my face, and my eyes burned with intensity. Colors flashed before me, but I didn't close my eyes. I was determined to keep looking until I remembered what I needed to. In the end, I fell asleep from exhaustion. When I woke up, everything seemed the same. I couldn't remember what had happened or why it had affected me so deeply. The only thing that remained was a strange sensation that I felt whenever I thought about God or Christ. It was a tingling feeling that started at the top of my skull and ran down my spine. It brought me joy and comfort, but I couldn't explain why. After that day, I forgot about the experience, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something significant had happened. 2003, Skneti, butterfly. I dreamed I was a butterfly, but now I wonder, was I a man dreaming of being a butterfly? Or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am a man? Zhuangzi. During a supposed vacation with friends in Skneti, I find no respite. My 1.5-year-old daughter, Imma, keeps me awake with her constant nighttime crying. It's been 2 years since I've slept through the night, leaving me utterly exhausted. Yet in the daylight hours, when is happily engaged in play, I seize the opportunity to immerse myself in books, seeking some form of relaxation. One day, while strolling through the forest, a massive, dark, and multicolored butterfly catches my attention, hovering above. Its path is a straight line, an oddity that strikes me. I can't recall ever seeing a butterfly glide in such a manner. It becomes apparent that the butterfly is trailing us, seemingly intent on a purpose. Curiously, I extend my hand, and to my astonishment, it settles on my palm without hesitation. The moment is so unexpected that I burst into laughter. Ide gazes at the butterfly and expresses her desire to hold it too, reaching out her hand. In response, the butterfly takes flight, resuming its linear path above me. I offer my hand once more, and as if recognizing an unspoken invitation, it alights again. Despite inadvertently frightening it away, the butterfly bravely returns to my palm for a third time. After a brief mutual gaze, it finally departs. This encounter with such an unusually large and magnificent butterfly in Skneti leaves me in wonder. On my return home, my thoughts swirl with curiosity. What was this butterfly? Or who might it have been? Top of form. Exorcism in Dreams in Archangel Michael. Over time, my dreams began to take on an exorcistic quality. In dreams, I frequently encountered individuals who seemed to be under a dark influence, whether they arrived of their own free will or were brought against it. Their eyes betrayed their affliction, and the sight would fill me with dread. When I prayed, more often than not, the ominous presence within them would dissipate. As I honed my sensitivity to these negative energies, I started to detect those possessed by malevolent entities even while awake. I came to understand that such individuals often lose their connection to divine energies, either through a rejection of spirituality or the weight of their misdeeds. Their energies seem to flow inversely, drawing life force from their environment. Much like energy vampires, they became indistinguishable from the incorporeal demonic entities that inhabit unseen realms, starved of the natural spiritual influx that fuels the human soul's light. Fortunately, redemption is always within reach, as people can choose to return to a state of grace. You can often identify these afflicted individuals by the feeling of exhaustion after interacting with them. They radiate a palpable negativity and tend to be disliked. Their behaviors may include a propensity for conflict, an intolerance for differing views, a compulsion to dominate conversations, incessant grumbling, and a penchant for spreading gloom. Regrettably, such individuals are not uncommon. They might even be our family members, blending into society seamlessly. Particularly in large urban centers today, there is such a surfeit of negative energy that these individuals find ample nourishment, allowing them to thrive materially. I devoted many hours each day to prayer, hoping to dispel the demonic vibes and energies. The prayers I offered to Archangel Michael felt particularly powerful, and it was through these that I forged a deep connection with the angel. Over time, as I combated the demons in my dreams, I sensed Michael's presence drawing nearer, though he remained unseen to me. I came to understand that beings of light like Michael vanquish darkness solely with their spiritual radiance. Michael possesses such formidable and unwavering spiritual strength that he can descend into hellish realms without being corrupted by their malignant energies. A testament to his power that few can claim. Demonic entities scatter due to the clash of their spiritual vibrations with those of the light. It was later explained to me that beings of light do not kill. They either repel or transform. Often, even the most shadowed souls retain a dormant spark of light, which when exposed to the radiance of an enlightened soul, can be ignited by synchronizing with its luminosity. Thus, through prayer and the influence of the light, a person's soul can find healing. Michael's presence became particularly tangible during confrontations with demonic entities. His intervention was akin to the relief brought by laughter after a moment of fear, similar to how a well-timed joke eases the tension during a horror film. I often mused that if Michael were mortal, he'd possess an exceptional sense of humor. His youthful vigor and the infectious joy he exuded were potent spiritual qualities that he shared with me, helping to elevate me from the oppressive, dark energies that once shrouded me. The emotions stirred within the human heart by such divine interactions are profound, a blend of delight, appreciation, and joy that words can scarcely capture. One cannot help but fall deeply in love with these celestial beings. The affinity for kind-hearted individuals is natural, and it's even more effortless to embrace the divine within your heart. After experiencing such a connection, there is a persistent yearning that lingers. You want to be near them constantly, feeling as though you've returned to your childhood home, where you embraced your mother and fell asleep like a child, free from all worries and burdens. This yearning is indescribable, a hunger of the soul and an unconscious longing of the mind. It fosters a profound, unseen bond with that soul, a bond that transcends and is more resilient than any earthly friendship. It feels like an expansion of your being, akin to finding your other half, without whom life seems incomplete. Perhaps this is one of the ways God reaches out to humanity, through these intermediaries. What kind of love does God instill in the human heart for angels? It may be an amalgam of the affection between mother and child, the respect between master and disciple, the camaraderie between friends, or the kinship between soulmates. This is the nature of my bond, intertwined with Christ on one end and with Michael on the other. Dubrovitsy Church. I recall being 16 and visiting my Russian grandparents in Podolsk. During that trip, my mother introduced me to a magnificent church nestled in the village of Dubrovitsy, part of the Golitsyn family estate. This serene and luminous spot on earth cradles a church constructed in a distinctive style, featuring a golden crown atop its gray, ornately carved facade. Adorned with stunning ornaments and Gothic statues, the church harmonizes with the architectural traditions of Russian temples. Yet beyond its external allure, I found myself captivated by the interior frescoes, particularly those of the archangels. I remember my mother explained to me, Orthodoxy depicts saints in two distinct manners, the realistic and the non-realistic. Realistic icons show saints with a lifelike presence, painted by adhering to traditional rules. The non-realistic icons, however, are symbolically rendered, with a more two-dimensional appearance, crafted according to a specific canon. This approach aims to draw the viewer's focus away from the physical portrayal of the saint to their spiritual essence. The fresco that captured my gaze was not just rendered with a master's realism, but also with exceptional artistry. I stood there transfixed, my attention held by the image of Michael, where both his visual representation and spiritual significance coalesced beautifully. "2006, the birth of my younger child, a vision of Jesus, and a glimpse into the future." During my second pregnancy, I faced numerous health issues that left me feeling utterly drained. The pain in my kidney was so severe that I found it impossible to stay still. It became clear that I was entering labor when the pain peaked every 10 minutes. Upon arrival at the maternity ward, I experienced intense pain but struggled to maintain composure without crying out or making a fuss. Amidst this, a stranger, who seemed to be a nurse, came to sit beside me and held my hand as the contractions grew more fierce. My grip on her hand tightened with each wave of pain, and I found myself apologizing for causing her any trouble. Her presence was a source of immense comfort. It felt as though she absorbed some of my suffering, lightening my pain. I still remember her weary face, seemingly numb from seeing so much pain. While her name remains unknown to me, my heart swells with gratitude for her to this very day. The delivery itself was arduous, as my baby was particularly large. The pain escalated to a level that was simply insufferable. In response, my uncle, who was a chief gynecologist, sympathized with my plight and administered a shot of painkillers. Contrary to expectation, the medication didn't lessen my pain. Instead, it made me groggy, causing me to drift off to sleep between contractions. When a contraction would strike, I would jolt awake in excruciating pain, perceiving a blurred line between dream and reality, as though I existed in both realms at once. During the pregnancy, something went wrong, prompting my uncle to urgently place a monitoring device on my stomach to check the baby's heartbeat. He abruptly stood, shouting for adrenaline. "The baby's heart has stopped. Quick, adrenaline!" Someone hurried off, leaving me in a state of anxious anticipation for the doctors to return. In those tense moments, I fervently prayed for my child, reciting a prayer to Jesus with each sighting of him. It wasn't shocking to me when he appeared by my side. In a dreamlike state of exhaustion, I confessed to him, "I have no more strength." His serene response was, "There is always strength." Reflecting on those words now, I grasped their profound significance beyond what I initially understood. I implored Jesus for help in saving my child, and as the doctors rushed back in, my uncle placed the stethoscope to listen again, and finally let out a relieved sigh. "It's beating." I continued to pray relentlessly until my son was born. Never before had I engaged in prayer with such intensity. The painkillers lulled me into sleep every couple of minutes, but each prayer seemed to pull me back to consciousness. In my dreams, I visualized prayer as a fiery energy, spiraling out in lines from around me toward a destination beyond my knowing. The room seemed to swirl with different hues. This vivid experience conveyed an incredible sense of power and beauty, teaching me the ways in which human pain can amplify spiritual energies. Prayer during that ordeal assumed a new, incandescent form. My baby arrived, distinguished by his plump cheeks and clenched fists. I caught only a fleeting glimpse before he was taken away. Unlike after my first childbirth, they did not place him on my chest. Instead, my uncle entered with a troubled look and instructed me to rest, administering a sedative. I drifted off without needing any further encouragement, quickly succumbing to a deep sleep. I awoke at 5 in the morning to the unsettling silence of an empty cradle where my baby should have been. Reluctant to worry my family further, I still needed to know where my baby was. The nurse's cryptic response to my inquiry only intensified my concern. He's stable. What did that imply? As the nurses departed, snippets of their conversation drifted to me. I think her child might have died, and she's unaware. Panic threatened to set in, but asking my own heart, I received a reassuring feeling. It assured me that my child was alive. This inner conviction was so potent that it nearly dissolved all my anxiety. Yet I had to wait until morning for confirmation. Overcome by fatigue, sleep claimed me once more. In my dream, I found myself looking into a bowl brimming with water, almond petals floating atop. Suddenly, the petals withered and vanished, replaced by vibrant evergreen branches. A symbol, it seemed, of good news. The ephemeral had given way to the enduring. The branches, too, disappeared, and the water stilled, transforming into a reflective surface that revealed the future. I saw my son, grown and attending the same kindergarten as my eldest daughter, under Aunt Menzia's care. I envisioned Aunt Menzia calling, inviting me to accompany her to the costume rental for the children's carnival. "Your boy must be a prince," she exclaimed as we got into the car. In my dream, I was clad in a green jacket, and all seemed well. I had landed a new job. Waking from the dream, I was enveloped in a profound sense of tranquility, confident that everything would turn out fine. My son required surgery for a hernia in his diaphragm. It developed during birth, causing his intestines to displace, which subsequently shifted his lung and heart slightly to the right. This complication likely occurred when his heart ceased and then miraculously restarted during delivery. Our battle for his life was intense, as both his lungs and kidneys were not functioning properly. As he was transferred from the maternity ward, a poignant phrase accompanied him: "Consider him a gift from God." We named our son. Though I can't recall whether it was my idea or my husband's, given the uncertainties surrounding his health, we baptized him quickly in the maternity ward. The selection of his godparents was made in haste as well, and I don't remember who suggested them. Upon bringing him home, he bore scars like a soldier returning from battle, yet he appeared pain-free and offered me smiles that reached his eyes. 4 years on, he attended Aunt Messia's kindergarten. True to my dream, Messia called, requesting a ride to the costume rental shop. There I started looking for a beast costume since he was to play the role of the beast in a school play. To my surprise, Aunt Menzia presented both a monster mask and a prince's costume. "I thought my son was to be a beast," I questioned. "He is a beast, but he's also an enchanted prince," Menzia responded with a smile. 2009, Rome, a peculiar dream. Foretelling the future. Before the eventful year of 2012, when I was still frequently dreaming about devils, one particular dream remained vivid in my memory for 2 reasons. It turned out to be tragically prophetic, and it was strikingly bizarre. In 2009, following the unrest of the 2008 Russian-Georgian War, my husband, our friends, and I embarked on a Euro trip seeking tranquility. Rome was among our stops, and the journey was filled with vibrant and joyous moments that helped lift the weight of the post-war gloom. I was brimming with positive energy, constantly content and cheerful. It was during this upbeat period that I dreamed of an unusual encounter with an imp. I was on a public transport vehicle, perhaps a bus, amidst the hustle of Rome, when among the crowd I spotted a devil strolling as if it were an ordinary sight. Small and cunning, it had an aura of a more formidable demon. The creature would approach one person, whisper something, then move to the next, yet no one seemed to recognize it for what it was. As ever, it caught me watching and charged towards me, furious. But instead of succumbing to fear, prayer, or jolting awake, I attempted to communicate with it and said with complete sincerity, "You exist by the will of God, for you are also His creation. One day, you too shall return to Him. Bless you." I was taken aback by my own words, and surprisingly, so was the devil. He appeared moved, even receptive, and he replied, "I am loathed. They battle me, yet no one has ever blessed me. Would you allow me to serve you?" It didn't pause for my response. Instead, it morphed into a white, fluffy being and settled on my lap. I had no desire for its service. Despite its harmless appearance, a dark and malevolent energy emanated from it. I knew that while I maintained control and showed no vulnerability, it would remain white and fluffy. But the moment it sensed any weakness or error, it would revert to its true form. Therefore, I politely requested that it depart. "May I at least read your future?" it proposed eagerly. The last thing I wanted was a devil prognosticating my future, so I declined. Nonetheless, it persisted. "Then, let me read your friend's future." That friend had just boarded the bus where this encounter was unfolding. She had been married for less than a year. The devil approached my friend and began to speak. I attempted to alert her to the devil's presence, but oddly, no one acknowledged me, as if I were invisible. The devil then spoke to my friend. "You will not bear children, and your husband will be the cause." A decade has since elapsed, and regrettably, this dark prediction remains unchallenged. Winter 2012. A cosmic beam. I see in a dream a magnificent beam of light descending upon the earth, originating from the vast expanse of space. The arrival of this beam fills me with a profound sense of cosmic import, as if it carries an extraordinary purpose for our planet, shrouded in immeasurable significance. Accompanying the descent of the beam, celestial forces mobilize themselves. Bright forces gather on the right side of the sky, led by Christ Himself, while dark forces congregate on the left. As I witness this celestial spectacle, I'm astonished to see the appearance of the northern lights, an extraordinary phenomenon uncommon in our latitude. A palpable tension fills the atmosphere, and the lights reveal the presence of invisible beings now made visible. "What was once concealed is now revealed," whispers a voice, as if revealing a hidden truth. A sense of foreboding weighs upon me, as if the end of the world, as we knew it, has come. It appears that time is running out, leaving no opportunity for alteration. Every fragment of spiritual essence that we have nurtured throughout our reincarnations will be exposed, laid bare before the cosmic tribunal of judgment. Is this the culmination we have long awaited? Could this truly be the end? I share my concerns with my mother, exclaiming, "This is it." She questions whether it is truly impossible to change anything, to which I respond, "No longer. The expectation of something crucial lingers, but its nature remains elusive." I turn to my mother, seeking answers, Yet she too is unaware. Desperate for guidance, I inquire with my grandmother, but she also admits her lack of knowledge. Suddenly, a young man approaches, hastily hands me some books, and disappears, urgently calling out, "Time is running out." In a moment of clarity, I find myself soaring above a vast expanse of untouched forests. Evergreen pine trees stretch beneath me, evoking a profound inner lightness. It is reminiscent of the serene landscapes of Alaska or Siberia. "You can make this your home," a voice suggests, resonating within me. Upon waking, the persistent feeling returns that someone is expecting something from me, hindering me from fulfilling my duties due to a frustrating lack of memory. I am driven to remember, to restore something in my mind that connects to the genesis of humanity. Yet I remain bewildered about my role in all of this. Towering mountains stand before me, and as I breathe deeply, it feels as though crystal particles transform into life-sustaining air, filling my lungs. The atmosphere carries a distinct essence, pulsating with the breath of life. Megalithic stone structures materialize, captivating my gaze. Have I walked among them in a bygone era? The answer eludes me, lost in the depths of forgotten knowledge. Each morning, I awaken with the persistent belief that someone telepathically contacts me, urging me to recall something, emphasizing its significance and urgency. Another thought intertwines with these thoughts, that there is a message for me to find. Find the message. It's spinning in my head. In search of answers, I turn to a yoga teacher, a kindred spirit who embraces my eccentricity. I share my inner voice's insistence on remembering humanity's distant past and uncovering hidden messages. It seems that this statement was too strange even for him. He laughs and says, "Do you have children?" I answer, "I have." "Go and look after them. That is your job, your goal, and your yoga." I return home and try to forget everything. Perhaps I have shared moments of confusion with others without realizing it. Yet, I remind myself that many who are labeled as insane believe they are normal. I laugh at these thoughts and continue with my life as usual, although a lingering sense of guilt remains within me. Though my visits to the church are infrequent, during moments of confession, I beseech God for forgiveness, recognizing my failure to fulfill a duty, my inability to remember my true nature. Neither the pastor nor I can fully comprehend the depths of my plea. Once more, the telepathic message resonates within me. Find the message. It reverberates, urging me onward with a sense of urgency. When uncertainty engulfs me, I turn to my computer seeking guidance. I type the word message into YouTube, yearning for a connection, a recognition deep within my being. Yet whether in Russian, Georgian, or English, I find no content that aligns with my internal resonance. It would take another 5 years before this elusive message would finally reveal itself to me. Around 2012 to 2013, breaking out of prison. In my dream, I find myself imprisoned alongside my daughter, with no means of escape from the confines of our captors. The atmosphere is filled with torment, as we helplessly witness the suffering inflicted upon others. Fear and disillusionment consume me, aware of the impenetrable fortifications that surround us. Trapped within a cell, we await the arrival of our captors, our hearts heavy with trepidation. Suddenly, a calm voice emerges from the depths of the unknown. If you desire to leave, then do so, Bewildered, I scan our surroundings, convinced that escaping from this heavily fortified stronghold is an impossible feat. Yet the voice persists. If your desire is to leave, simply rise and go. Guided by an irresistible trust, I follow the voice's call. I take my daughter's hand, and together we approach the door. By chance, a distraction captures the nearby guard's attention, offering us a brief window of invisibility. The next door, which had been left unlocked by oversight, beckons us. We seize this chance and embark on our path to freedom. Remarkably, each door that follows swings open as if guided by an unseen hand. The guards, either preoccupied or looking away, remain unaware of our silent passage. As we cross the prison yard, we get into a departing vehicle, cloaked in its concealment to avoid detection. After waking, I ponder the mysterious origin of the voice that led us. It seems to presage the future hardships my daughter and I will face. A time will come when our only solace will be an unwavering faith and trust in a higher power, a staunch belief in the divine to navigate the toughest of trials. July 2012. Another attempt at starting a church life. This year marked another chapter in my spiritual journey, as I sought to immerse myself more deeply in church life. Our return trip from Gudowari ski resort presented an unexpected opportunity when we offered a lift to a priest from a local monastery. Without prompting, I found myself eagerly discussing my passion for faith. The priest, recognizing my genuine interest, introduced me to a book on heart prayer. It resonated profoundly with me, filling a void I hadn't realized was there, despite my frequent solitary prayers to Jesus. The bond between the priest and me grew strong, and we soon became close friends. It was during this time that I first sensed how people who believe in Christ carry the energy of Christ within them. When I eventually met Jesus, which occurred a month later, I gained even greater clarity on how this energy manifests in the unique aspects of their souls. It resembles the familial connection where relatives share resemblances in their noses, eyes, or facial contours, owing to their shared bloodline. In a similar way, all of us are related to Christ through his flesh and blood. Some reflect his humility, while others embody his wisdom and kindness. Nevertheless, we are all united by his energy. I was eager to meet the head priest of the monastery, who had immense experience in the heart prayer and seemed capable of curing people's ailments with the divine energy carried through his heart. Our priest friend arranged a meeting with him for me. I remember how difficult it was to be open and honest with him, since my relationship with God was deeply personal, and discussing this topic was unfamiliar to me. Nevertheless, I told him about my dreams, and he listened attentively. Occasionally, he would smile, and his face would illuminate. At one point, he interrupted me with a question. "Did you come to these conclusions yourself, or have you read about them somewhere?" Confused by the question, I replied that these were solely my own thoughts. Another priest sat silently in the room, listening. When I finished speaking, the head priest smiled and said, "An angel speaks to me." Those words perplexed me, and I felt quite awkward. I hadn't anticipated such a response. I knew I was far from being an angel, so perhaps he sensed a spiritual presence akin to that of Archangel Michael. With great warmth and care, the head priest accompanied me to the exit and invited me to return the following week for him to teach me the heart prayer. I was filled with happiness, believing that I had finally found a spiritual guide. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it the next week, but I returned after 2 weeks. as I entered his chamber and greeted him, eagerly anticipating to learn the heart prayer and hear about his mystical experiences, I suddenly realized he was staring at me blankly. "Have you been here before?" he asked. Confused, I replied that I had visited 2 weeks earlier and that he himself had told me to return. "I can't remember you," he muttered, his expression as if he was seeing me for the first time. Remind me, what were we talking about? Unable to find the words, it was difficult for me to open up again. Would I repeat the same experience? Breaking the awkward silence, he suggested. "Attend the Mass occasionally. Become an apprentice to our monastery." Become an apprentice of the monastery seemed like a vague recommendation. My initial excitement and eagerness to embark on my spiritual journey were now replaced with confusion and disappointment. I thanked him, silently turned around, and left. I couldn't comprehend how he could have forgotten me so quickly. I understood that many people visited him, but did they all share their stories? I felt disheartened, but there was nothing I could do. Nevertheless, I still held warm sentiments towards the head priest and often engaged in silent conversations with him in my thoughts. When I created a drawing of smiling Christ, I promptly sent it to him, hoping he would sense that the icon was in fact a portrait. As it turned out, my expectations were exaggerated. I am still in contact with the priest we initially met. I occasionally confess to him and share my unbelievable dreams and visions, yet I find it challenging to completely open up. It seems that he cannot find anything to denounce, but he also can't fully embrace all of it, as if he's evading from what I tell him. 2012, disappointment and loss of faith. As time passed, I found myself growing increasingly weary of life. My health was deteriorating, and even simple daily tasks became overwhelming. The weight of stress from work, along with the political turmoil both in my country and worldwide, only added to the burden. The Georgian War and the ongoing Syrian conflict felt like a living nightmare, unfolding right before our eyes. Amidst these external challenges, profound shifts were occurring within me, though I struggled to fully comprehend them at the time. Gradually, I began to lose faith in humanity and found it increasingly difficult to connect with God. The once familiar presence seemed distant, and my ability to feel his presence within me waned. I attempted to love him, but it felt like an insurmountable task. How could I love a God who allowed such a pitiful creation as humankind to exist? The existence of such beings perplexed me, and I grappled with these thoughts. Many individuals might choose to suppress or hide such thoughts, burying them deep within their minds, where neither they nor God could bear witness to them. Unfortunately for me, these thoughts proved to be a significant downfall, leaving me defenseless against the demonic creatures lurking in the darkness of nights. August 9th, 2012. Sarakvi, an encounter with Christ. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Matthew 11:28-30. This day marked a turning point in my life. My close friend's son had become sick, and his mental health was in decline, plunging the whole family into distress over his grievous condition. It was summer, and I was with my children in a secluded spot named Sarakavi, a place so isolated it felt forgotten by both man and God. Yet it was this very remoteness, this detachment from the trappings of civilization, that drew me there. Tsarakvi was my sanctuary, a place where I could replenish both my spiritual and physical energies. Based on my experiences, demonic possession can be a contributing factor to mental health issues. I have developed a sensitivity to these entities within people's auras. One night, in a quiet state of both body and spirit, I entered an altered consciousness to examine the spiritual body of my friend's son. I mentally extended an invisible thread to him, immediately becoming aware of the telltale signs of demonic energies, which also recognized my presence. There seemed to be no other method for me to employ. As they threatened and cautioned against my intervention, I instinctively began to pray, channeling the force of my intense prayers into the heart of the demonic tumult. Despite knowing it might deplete my limited energy, I felt compelled to persist. For hours, I recited Jesus' prayer until a state of semi-consciousness overtook me, where one part of my mind drifted into sleep, while the other remained acutely aware, perceiving my environment with unusual clarity. In this liminal state, where dream and reality intersected, I saw spiritual events and could communicate with otherworldly beings. I confronted a grotesque, monstrous devil, a stark contrast to the human-like apparitions I usually perceived, identifiable only by their auras and eyes. This vision was fully endowed with traditional demonic features, fangs, horns, and hooves. Although it appears almost comical in retrospect, it was deeply unsettling at the moment. It led me to ponder why such entities are depicted with specific physical attributes, why demons are imagined with horns and hooves, or angels with bird-like wings, when they can traverse space swiftly, unbound by our physical laws. I concluded that my mind was manifesting these elements from deep-seated archetypes. Unfamiliar with the spiritual realm, it defaulted to recognizable shapes and concepts. Thus, when spiritual insight suggests a demonic presence, our brains often depict it in a form that is part beast and part predator, rooted in the collective unconscious. Before me stood a sinister demonic creature, emanating a power that made me tremble with fear. My shaken faith made me even more vulnerable to its menacing presence, as I no longer felt the protection of Christ. The devil spoke with a calm voice, but its words were laden with a bone-chilling threat. Sooner or later, you will stop praying, and I will take away what you hold most dear. My mind immediately raced to thoughts of my beloved family, particularly my children and husband. I knew my mother was with my kids, and her aura would protect them, but my husband was not by my side. Anxiety consumed me, and I fought to continue praying, but the creeping slumber threatened to overtake me. I stumbled over my words, struggling to remain conscious. As I began to lose my grip on reality, the demonic creature stood unmoving, waiting for me to succumb to its darkness. Suddenly, I felt someone shaking my shoulders, their voice ringing in my ears. "Don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep." With a surge of strength, I fought against the encroaching slumber, determined not to let the devil claim me. As I stirred awake, the demonic presence lingered close, though it was no longer in sight. The room was still, save for the faint light of the crescent moon that peeked through the window. I lay there, heavy with the weight of my own powerlessness. Like a boulder, it pressed against my chest, threatening to crush me entirely. Desperately, I reached out to Christ, though the words I used to summon him eluded me. Suddenly, dark energies dissipated both within and outside of me, replaced by a serene calmness that enveloped me completely. It was a quiet, deep silence that reached the very depths of my soul, akin to a mirror-like ocean without a ripple or a breeze. And in this state of spiritual stillness, my mind opened up to a vision of Christ sitting before me. He was garbed in robes of pure white, his arms crossed over his knees as he gazed calmly at me. The sight of him was undeniably, irrefutably real, more tangible than anything I had ever seen or experienced. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had been revealed to me, and in comparison our everyday world felt like an illusion. Despite the staggering enormity of what was happening, I felt no fear. Instead, a sense of peace washed over me, carrying with it a silent understanding that all would be well. And then, as if his presence had been a response to my thoughts, I heard him speak telepathically. "I have come to answer your questions. I will never forget those words. Who was he? Who was I? Yet he still came to me to answer my questions. He came to me as an equal, and I saw him as clearly as the room I was in, yet I still perceived him as immaterial and not part of the surrounding world. I felt that he knew everything about me, that I was an open book to him, and not a single corner of my soul could hide from his gaze, as if he knew every inch of my being, every thought that had ever crossed my mind. With a single thought, I posed my question to him, not with words, but with the very essence of my being. How many people can I take upon myself? As many as you love like your husband, he replied. You can love all of mankind and take everyone upon yourself. I came to understand that he was referring to himself. I recognized that true love is the force that binds humans together with their destinies in a shared space. The fates of others intertwine with our own. Their misfortunes and even their sins become our burdens. Willingly sharing in the suffering brought about by these sins to alleviate the weight on someone dear is an act of profound sacrifice. This path, the path of Christ, is one every true Christian is called to walk, bearing the weight of others like a cross, and carrying their sins alongside their own, as the ultimate expression of love. Reflecting within, I saw the wavering nature of my own love. There were few people for whom I harbored such deep affection. I felt ashamed, but Christ sat beside me, patient as ever. Thus, I voiced the question that troubled me deeply. Why would God create humanity this way, seemingly as a flawed experiment? Even I, with my tender grasp of spirituality, struggle to find God in my heart. So what does this mean for the average person? It feels as though we're all condemned to wander in darkness, each step fraught with error and distant from salvation. What is the meaning of human life if it is fraught with suffering? And how can I love God amidst all this? Christ's patient gaze invited an answer, a beacon of hope in the struggle to reconcile human suffering with divine love. As I contemplated my existential questions, the burden of my doubts and humanity's apparent shortcomings weighed on me. I grappled with understanding God's intention behind a world rife with suffering and anguish. Amidst this turmoil, I experienced an internal shift, a gentle expansion of awareness, as if my essence was reaching toward a more elevated state of being. Although my physical form was stationary, my spirit ascended, soaring until a spectacular vision unfolded before me. Our planet, amid all its commotion and disorder, sprawled beneath me like an immense, shadowy abyss. Beneath, people bustled, engrossed in their private worries and conflicts, overshadowed by dense clouds of negativity. From this vantage point, I saw our physical world as if through the lens of a heavenly realm. The irony did not escape me that in our era, some still ridicule the idea of a flat Earth, unaware of a larger truth, while in our three-dimensional world the Earth is a globe amidst the cosmos. From the heavenly perspective, the material world appears flattened. It seems our perception of reality is contingent upon our sensory state and the perspective from which we observe. This is the best way I can articulate the extraordinary scene that I beheld. In the dimension where I found myself, everything was enveloped in a light blue hue. It might sound simplistic, but that was the reality of my vision. I sensed an impulse from Christ to ascend even higher, yet I hesitated, captivated by my current surroundings. There was an absence of activity. It was an embodiment of stillness. Here, I was immersed in a state of consciousness that brought with it an inexplicable joy, derived not from external stimuli, but from the mere fact of being. To feel elation from existence alone was extraordinary. Nothing was needed or desired in this tranquil state. It felt as though this was the essence of our true nature, quite distinct from our usual reality. Even amidst this tranquility, my perception of the natural world remained intact. I observed everything as clearly as I did before. It seemed that perceiving this spiritual dimension was both comfortable and natural for the human mind. Only for some reason, it eludes us. Could this be the paradise lost by humanity? The inner celestial abode that the Savior speaks of being within us? It appears that with the realization of this heavenly plane, we might no longer seek joy from the external material world. While happiness derived from material possessions is fleeting, this presented a source of everlasting contentment. It was a state of being where you need nothing more to feel complete happiness, simply because you exist. Yet, reaching this level of consciousness is beyond ordinary means. It requires an elevation of one's consciousness. This light blue expanse was not completely devoid of presence. It was here that I found the answer to the question I had put to Christ. The space itself seemed to convey the response. Describing perceptions in such a dimension is a challenge. It is less about sight and more about feeling. I experienced an understanding of how God created humans. What I witnessed likely held symbolic meaning because the revelations from the spiritual realm often manifested as symbols to me. I saw God extract a part of himself from his heart, essence, imbued with boundless love. And with this, he fashioned humanity. In this act of creation, he embedded himself within us as the epitome of love, and I was enveloped by this sensation, God's love for mankind. He bestowed upon humanity his attributes, the capacity to create and the gift of free will. I've often pondered why God appeared in human form, given that my understanding of him is as the absolute, everything in everything. A yoga teacher provided clarity. Without this human representation, the process would have been incomprehensible to me. From this vantage point, I grasped the message of God's profound affection for humanity and his unseen participation in each person's life. I perceived his presence both within us, in our hearts, and externally as an observer to every instance of our emotions, pain, and joy. We are never truly alone, although for reasons yet unclear, this profound connection seems to be one-sided for the time being. As I gazed at Christ, his smile was unforgettable, and it would later inspire me to capture his likeness in a painting my friends would come to call Smiling Christ. In response to his smile, a wave of limitless joy washed over me, and I couldn't help but smile back. Searching for a parallel to this feeling in our world, I thought of my children and said to Christ, "We too experience such joy. When a little baby wraps their tiny arms around you and attempts a clumsy kiss, you feel a joy akin to this." Suddenly, I found myself amidst falling snow. This was not ordinary snow, but one formed of the subtle spiritual substance, an external reflection of my inner joy. In my heart, snow has always been a symbol of happiness. "Did I create this snow?" I asked him, my own smile reflecting the wonder I felt. Even as I posed the question, the answer came to me intuitively. If emotions and thoughts are forms of energy, then could the happiness and joy I've sent forth be considered a form of prayer? I inquired. Have my actions over the years been right? Christ's response was filled with joy, and in the realm of telepathic communication, he loudly affirmed with a yes. His enthusiasm was palpable. He wanted to ensure that I heard and understood this affirmation clearly, indicating the significance of the topic. I took his answer as both a revelation and a directive. Receiving such a mission from him, to pray with joy, filled me with elation. With these revelations still alive in my thoughts, I returned to the material world. The moon still hung in the sky as I succumbed to sleep, feeling Christ's presence by my side, protective and nurturing like a parent watching over a sleeping child. The next morning, I woke up transformed. Apprenticeship under the spiritual hierarchy. From that day forward, I sensed a significant transformation within myself. The realization that I was not alone brought me immense comfort. The knowledge I had gained from this experience eradicated my fears. I understood that God and Christ existed, and that there was a spiritual home awaiting my return, a place where I would experience unending bliss, protection, and happiness. Consequently, the future no longer seemed daunting, and life took on a new, profound significance. Following that transformative day, I was no longer troubled by demonic entities, and my spiritual sight began to explore higher realms. This transition occurred gradually, as I was slowly taught to exist within two parallel dimensions simultaneously. It was during this period that I acknowledged the truth. Although I had been granted such a vivid insight into the spiritual world once, there never existed an actual border separating these dimensions. I realized that it all hinged on my state of consciousness. If I had once succeeded in establishing a telepathic link with Christ, I knew I could do it again. This concept became an obsession that left me no peace. Every day I pleaded with him to maintain our connection. I might have seemed deranged, but I couldn't conceive of any other way, and beseeched him to take me on as a disciple. I never shared this story because I was certain no one would believe me, and I felt I shouldn't. It seemed as though Christ was testing me in some way. For the first year, I received brief instructions from him telepathically. Sometimes I saw these as symbols in my dreams, while other times I heard them clearly. This kind of hearing is a very subtle sensory perception, where a thought comes to mind accompanied by the unique energy of the sender. It's similar to hearing a person's voice without seeing them. You recognize the voice by the frequency of the sound vibration unique to the individual. This is also true for sent telepathic thought, which carries a vibrational frequency specific to the sender. Telepathic thought can be visualized as a kind of lucid dream. To do this, I had to enter an altered state of consciousness, a skill that came naturally to me, and that has been occurring since my childhood. Before I encountered Christ in this state, I traversed a spiritual dimension inhabited mostly by demonic beings and dark astral formations. Certain conditions are necessary to receive telepathic thoughts. One such requirement is being in a clean environment. The village of Tserakvi was just such a place. In large cities, telepathic perception is disrupted by a constant noise, which I often visualized as a black wind. Sometimes, the chaotic thoughts of strangers would swirl before my eyes. So when I was in Tbilisi, I would wake up between 4 and 5 in the morning, when everyone else was asleep and the surroundings were relatively clean, and try to connect with the spiritual world. During these periods, my physical hearing would also become extremely acute, with even a slight, sudden noise jarring my senses. It felt as though my nervous system was under immense tension. In this state, I could sense the sounds of the physical world not just through my ears, but also with my palms, an experience that was quite unsettling. These sensations would abruptly pull me out of my altered consciousness, highlighting my need for silence. This year, I made a significant decision. I surrendered my soul and free will to Christ and Father God through His mediation. I voiced this request 3 times. Now, in retrospect, I see how I was acting intuitively and how the subsequent events unfolded in a logical sequence. I've since realized that accelerating spiritual evolution is impossible without aid from the high spiritual realm. The beings of the spiritual hierarchy are always prepared to assist us, but there are 2 unbreakable rules. 1, they cannot fully assist a person without that person's goodwill, and 2, help can only be provided if it promotes the individual's spiritual growth. Since the purpose of human beings being here in the material world is only that and nothing else. However, since people's requests often focus on material prosperity or problem solving rather than spiritual growth, such requests usually go unanswered. If, however, an individual willingly entrusts the protection of their soul to the Supreme, the forces of light are permitted to intervene more substantially in the person's karma or fate. This often manifests as an acceleration of one's karma in the form of increased trials and tribulations. Although the person might have been alone until that point, they now have a powerful spiritual ally to whom they've surrendered their guardianship. This surrender may outwardly seem to result in a decline in the quality of life, as the individual's plan for karmic resolution appears to be rewritten, and they are beset by various challenges. Yet, this is where the individual's readiness to cooperate with pure forces and their absolute trust in their spiritual guide should shine through. When choosing a spiritual guide from the hierarchy of light forces, each person should listen to their heart and choose the entity with whom they feel the most spiritual affinity. This could be a saint, the Virgin Mary, the Savior himself, or someone else, depending on the person's religious beliefs and spiritual affiliation. The first year was foundational. I often received a telepathic message of humility from Christ, suggesting that if I ever considered myself superior to anyone, I should visualize myself as a fish, buried in the sand at the bottom of the deepest ocean, with no one beneath me. It's a funny metaphor, but it was also a kind of spiritual exercise. During that year, my relationship with Michael intensified, and I sensed that it was then that Christ transitioned my guidance over to Michael, even though Christ had always been at my side previously. Michael taught me how to dispel dark forces by illuminating my heart. He explained 2 methods, using the energy of prayer or using the light of the heart. the latter being the vibration of one's own soul, which should be at a high level and should be my ultimate goal. It's akin to the difference between the light of the moon and the sun. The moon doesn't generate its own light and uses the sun's, while the sun is a self-luminous body. By using the prayer of another, such as a saint, you borrow and utilize their energy. In contrast, the light of the heart represents the highest state of your own soul. Michael instructed me on how to achieve the solidity and purity of these lights. The goal is to ensure that dark forces cannot detect any matching lower frequency vibrations in your spiritual body, as they could shift you to their frequency, encircle you, and diminish the light of your soul. On the spiritual plane, these processes involve exchanges of energies and vibrations. In the material world, this may manifest as the generation of fear, anger, desire for revenge, and so forth. Michael enlightened me that everything in the universe is essentially a wave energy oscillation of different frequencies. It might require an adept understanding of physics to fully grasp these concepts. As explained to me, since it's not possible to create all necessary circumstances for identifying, addressing, and learning from one's flaws within a single lifetime, these circumstances are instead constructed concurrently in dreams, taking the form of various scenarios and life situations. There, I was expected to act, learn, and cultivate spiritual qualities. Consequently, my dreams morphed into lucid dreams. The narratives were often fantastical, yet everything felt real within the dream state. One lesson, for instance, aimed to clarify why it often seems that individuals of low spirituality and malevolent intent live long, carefree lives, while good-hearted people endure immense hardships and often depart from this world prematurely. This question frequently stirred feelings of indignation and a sense of injustice within me. According to some Christian interpretations, this scenario is a result of God's desire to test human resilience and loyalty through suffering. When I first encountered this perspective, it reminded me of the torturous experiments conducted by fascist doctors to determine human endurance limits. I believe such a portrayal of God is greatly blasphemous. In fact, I can't think of a more egregious form of blasphemy. Such views are partly why fear of God, rather than love for Him, prevails in the Church. This brings to mind a remark made by a Christian pastor. When a parishioner asked why he should fear God, when God is love and can be loved in return, the pastor posed a counter question. Do you love God more, or your son? The parishioner fell silent, to which the pastor responded, if you cannot love him, that's why you should fear. I pondered over this statement for quite a while, sensing a truth within it, until Michael sent me a dream. As always, the dream was symbolic. In the dream, I was the commander of a vast army in a fantastical world. I led the army up a mountain, with our progress being slow. The noblest, bravest, and most meritorious warriors stood in the front ranks. Those further back were less conscious and harder to control, though physically more robust and faster. As we neared the summit, I halted the army. We had reached the end of the forest, and moving onto the open field risked a confrontation with the cannibalistic giants, a conflict we were unlikely to win due to their superior strength. Thus, it was crucial to proceed silently to avoid detection. I cautioned the army, and the front ranks complied, but noise persisted from the back ranks, resulting in our discovery by the giants. Faced with a dilemma, I quickly entered negotiations. Their representative proposed that if I willingly surrendered a few of my soldiers, the rest of us would be spared. I considered several options. If I refused, giants would attack, and the noble warriors at the front, including myself, would be the first to fall. Those at the back, who caused the problem in the first place, were far enough away and sufficiently fast and strong to potentially escape. This scenario struck me as unjust, as from a material perspective, the death of the good and the survival of the bad seemed unfair. Michael rebuked me lately for thinking in material terms. I'd like to say that I showcased true leadership by sacrificing myself and my closest comrades, but I didn't. The people at the back, whose actions led to this predicament, were laughing and carrying on as if nothing had happened, angered by the fact that either the best among us should perish or we should all face certain death in an unequal battle because of them. I decided to hand over 3 of these inconsiderate individuals to giants to save everyone else. At the time, this decision seemed entirely justified to me. The dream abruptly halted and I heard Michael's voice. Your decision was incorrect. Imagine all of humanity as a line ascending a mountain. The mountain's height represents levels of consciousness. Those with high consciousness, i.e. high spirituality, are leading, and some have even reached or are near the pinnacle of divine consciousness. People with lower consciousness are trailing behind. These individuals often have stronger physical bodies because the divine energy held within their physical and subtle bodies is allocated more to their physical rather than mental and lower subtle bodies. For us, there are no good or bad people, just those who are advanced and those who are lagging. Don't you humans feel empathy for those who struggle and fall behind while climbing a mountain? God feels the same way. To God, a bad person is as valuable as a good one. Our goal is to help those who are lagging to progress. The phrase, "Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you," embodies this process. When you pray for someone, you not only grow spiritually, but also channel the energy of your prayer towards that lagging individual. Another crucial point is the spiritual aura of a lagging individual often takes on a demonic nature and acquires a negative quality. It's vital for us that humanity's mental and spiritual field evolves uniformly, meaning the line ascending the mountain doesn't stretch too long. Otherwise, a polarization occurs between advanced and lagging souls, leading to conflicts and wars in the physical world as the positive and negative charges clash. Many historical events testify to this. It's for this reason that advanced individuals often have shorter lives, while lagging individuals live longer. These are repeated opportunities for the latter to gain more spiritual development. The more advanced a person is, the closer they get to the peak, the tougher life's trials become. On one hand, these trials help them acquire refined spiritual qualities. On the other hand, they allow for the processing of more karmic debts, as one cannot approach the peak burdened by sin. Concerning the priest who advocates fearing God, individuals stand at different levels based on their level of consciousness or spirituality. Some have a heart so delicate and pure that they are open to perceiving the higher spiritual world, and if they possess the right desire, they can experience God's love. A person of lower consciousness has suppressed subtle sensations, and to control their primal, earthly desires, they indeed need fear as a restraining force. However, fear, by its nature, is a demonic vibrational energy and is only acceptable to people of lower consciousness, as they lack the capacity for more at this stage of development. Identifying an individual's spiritual potential and charting the suitable path for their spiritual development is the primary goal of a spiritual master. You cannot unite everyone under one umbrella. What aids one person's development may hinder another's. This is one of the reasons why so many religions exist, and they should continue to exist as long as they serve spiritual evolution. But as people's consciousness shifts to another level, many things will change in this area too. Using the mountain allegory, we can compare different religions to different paths leading to the peak. One mountaineer with weak knees but a strong heart needs one route. Another with a strong heart but weak legs requires a different route. And a third, fully prepared and robust, can choose the shortest but steepest route. This also applies to people's national or racial characteristics. At a fundamental genetic level, individuals' abilities and aspirations differ, meaning they cannot all follow the same path. Consider this. One person, when asked, "What is the sun?" might say that the sun is a bright, fiery white spot in the sky. Another person might answer that the sun is a celestial body, where hydrogen is thermonuclearly synthesized into helium, resulting in photons that reach Earth as light energy. Which one is correct? Both are, from their respective levels of consciousness. This is akin to different religions, which exist because they each resonate with different levels of consciousness. However, due to the imperfections of the material world, no religion existing today is completely free from errors, even at their respective levels of consciousness. Some religions or religious groups might be 10% inaccurate, others might be 90% off the mark. When a religion's error exceeds a certain threshold, it no longer facilitates spiritual development. Instead of guiding people toward the peak, it drives them downward. Such institutions should be eradicated. They have no right to exist. Michael conveyed to me that he did not wish for me to establish a deep affiliation with any specific religion, including the Orthodox Christian Church, or to submit unconditionally to any pastor or guru. This perspective remained true, even though I considered myself to be within the field of the Christ egregore. The reasoning behind this stance became clear to me later. Autumn 2012, A Vow of Truth. My invisible spiritual guides required me to take the vow of truth. Naturally, this vow came with the caveat that while it was necessary to speak the truth, it was also permissible to remain silent. In other words, the terms were clear. At the time, I believed this wouldn't be particularly challenging, as I rarely lied. However, this vow led me to abandon a major project at work, which was essentially equivalent to resigning. I left because I could not bear the falsification of results and the perpetuation of falsehoods in reports. It is precisely because of this vow of truth that I am compelled to disclose such personal sentiments in this book, which is not something I am accustomed to, but I feel duty-bound to be completely honest, and this vow obliges me to do so. A month earlier, the atmosphere at my work had become more strained. The more I accomplished, the more they demanded of me. I had the sense that they wouldn't be satisfied until I was entirely exhausted. This tension, coupled with the accompanying jiggery-pokery, stirred a constant irritation within me, a state that was not befitting for someone on a path of spiritual development. What was worse was that I felt powerless to change anything. This went on for a year. On one hand, I was pleading to be accepted as a disciple of Christ, and on the other hand, I was grappling with myriad problems and my own internal turmoil. Summer 2013, Tserakvi, Encounter with the Devil from the Mirror. In the summer of 2013, I visited Tserakvi with the expectation that, after a year, I would meet and converse with Jesus again in a pure environment. I fervently prayed before falling asleep, pleading for a chance to speak with him, even if it were in my dreams. However, the dream I had was entirely unexpected. In my dream, I saw myself lying in bed next to a large mirror. Suddenly, Ella's small, devilish girl started to emerge from this mirror. As was my usual response, I began to pray in an attempt to exorcise the devil, but I felt my prayers lacked strength. The devil grabbed my hand, and I immediately experienced a surge of irritation, a feeling to which I had recently become accustomed. As her hand sank further into mine, my irritation intensified. Overwhelmed by fear and weakness, I thought this must be how devils abduct sinful souls to their realm. My prayers were ineffective. Desperate, I recalled a dream I had in Rome. I told the devil, "Perhaps you, too, are a creation of God, and one day you will return to him. You are blessed." As I spoke these words, I felt my inner turmoil transition from irritation to tranquility. The devilish girl swiftly pulled her hand from mine, as if she had touched a flame, and with a snarl and a curse, she retreated back into the mirror. Stunned, I couldn't believe I had endured such an ordeal. I chided Christ and Michael for abandoning me in such a predicament. Then, I sensed the Savior's presence. I couldn't see him, but I felt his amusement. He wasn't just smiling, he was laughing and said to me, "No matter whether evil presents itself as the devil or as work-related trouble, your resistance should be the same." His message was crystal clear and simple. I had to learn the same lesson repeatedly, which made me feel a sense of self-reproach. Summer in Rhodes. Lessons from Michael. Rhodes is bathed in sunlight. This solar energy is Michael's energy. I feel that despite the hotel being crowded with people, Michael feels at ease in this sun-drenched environment, making it easier for us to communicate. After all, the sun is his domain. I hear Michael's telepathic thoughts almost constantly and engage in conversation with him just as frequently. Our relationship, once that of master and disciple, has gradually evolved into a sincere friendship. He shares spiritual knowledge with me, and in turn, I share all the good things that I experience in the earthly dimension. In addition to positive emotions, I also share my concerns about my children, which are always in the back of my mind. My daughter is at a challenging age. She's 13 years old, and true to her age, can be quite stubborn and mischievous. One evening, my husband and I found ourselves once again upset with her and went to bed still angry. We probably fall into the category of lenient parents because neither of us handles conflict well. We are often ready to relent and forget many things just to avoid conflict in the family. The situation is the same now, but we are standing our ground, and despite the significant temptation, we are maintaining our stance towards our daughter. I wake up in the middle of the night, as is often the case, and enter a state of altered consciousness, where I say to Michael, "If we forgive her now, it will be a sign of our weakness." I sense his surprise. "When did forgiveness become a weakness?" he asks. "You're still thinking in terms of the material world." Look, suddenly, we find ourselves in front of a large, ornately carved gate. Everything around us is in black and white. "This is the inner world of your child," he tells me. I understood that what I was seeing was a symbolic visualization, but at the same time it was very real and impactful. This simultaneously illusory and concrete dimension was one of the manifestations of the spiritual world. During these visualizations, I often saw Michael as a silhouette. He would appear to me as a small boy, sometimes as a young man, and only once did I witness his glowing, fiery form. But that would come later. We walked through the gate into a landscape littered with mounds of crumpled papers. When I tried to avoid these hills of paper, walking became difficult. But upon stepping into the paper mound, my steps were surprisingly lighter. This illogical inconsistency mildly irritated me, mirroring the feelings I had towards my daughter's behavior, which I often found illogical. I realized that each symbol had a specific meaning. Michael picked up one of the crumpled papers. "Your child has many internalized feelings. Each piece of paper represents a distinct problem. If you unravel this paper on a spiritual level, you will also solve the corresponding problem on a physical level," he explained. He was teaching me how to navigate the spiritual world and recognize its significance. On another night, he showed me how people emanate joy when they gather together and laugh. I saw this energy visualized as light. Until then, I had dismissed group fun as largely frivolous, and I found the hotel's clown animators entertainment program utterly inane, to which Michael had a different perspective. To me, it doesn't matter whether a person is a professor or a clown. What matters is the energy their soul emits. You can always assess a person by their spiritual aura. Look. He initiated another visualization, and I saw the hotel complex's large amphitheater, where I had briefly been the previous evening before leaving. The animator was cracking jokes in multiple languages, so that people of diverse nationalities could understand his performance. I didn't find it particularly funny. The humor was somewhat corny, seemingly aimed at an average European demographic, but the general audience appeared to be thoroughly enjoying themselves. Suddenly, one of the animators burst from backstage, rushing towards the spectators in the front rows, high-fiving each one. As he did this, I saw a wave of light emanate from the hearts of the people he touched. Michael said, "I like this person. You may not enjoy crowds, but it's better to be where the energy of wholesome joy radiates." The following night, while in a state of altered consciousness, I saw Michael holding something akin to a frame with a uniform blue background in the center. He said to me, "Crystallize it." His succinct instruction left me somewhat perplexed. I pondered over the meaning of crystallize, realizing I had to decipher it on my own. I was accustomed to Michael's preference for brevity. His telepathic messages were always concise. When no other ideas came to mind, I extended my hand towards the frame and began to recite a prayer. My prayer was the Jesus prayer, which I repeated over and over, either in sync with my heartbeat or in a continuous murmur. I attempted to shape the energy of the prayer into a stream and directed it towards the square. Unexpectedly, I saw the space within the frame start to vibrate, and something protruded from it that resembled mountains. As soon as the thought of mountains entered my mind, the stream halted, and the square reverted to its original form. Michael encouraged me to interpret and articulate explanations myself, which he would either affirm or refute. As he explained, it is crucial for them that a person reaches the right conclusions independently, without relying on pre-packaged instructions or opinions. Only in such cases does the acquired knowledge become a property of their soul and their own achievement. The conclusion I formulated, approved by Michael, was as follows. Subtle matter is extremely sensitive, and to shape it with thought energy, one must concentrate the flow of thought and maintain purity of thought. This is achieved through extensive training and discipline of specific spiritual qualities. All individuals possess the ability to transform spiritual matter with thought energy at a rudimentary level. However, this ability is amplified in an exalted soul, which carries a substantial responsibility. The power of both positive and negative thinking is magnified. It's particularly significant when a person is bestowed with the power of prayer. This divine energy must be used with pure intentions, for misuse can result in severe karmic consequences. As the saying goes, the higher you climb, the harder you can fall. Thus, I needed to be continuously mindful of my thoughts, incessantly analyzing and regulating my emotions and ideas. Thought hygiene, that's what I named this practice. Spiritual trials and dreams. Michael regularly devised spiritual trials for me, which mainly fell into two categories. The first involved placing me amidst demonic entities and observing my reactions. The extent to which these entities found matching energies within my aura served as an indicator of the purity of my heart. Initially, I would experience a chilling wave of fear, but I would then center myself and confront these entities with the power of prayer. Occasionally, Michael would guide the energy of my prayer. Other times, I was required to harness the light within my heart, which proved challenging as it necessitated achieving a state of internal spiritual harmony despite the surrounding demonic presence. In moments of confusion when neither method proved successful, I would seek Michael's assistance, often met with a stern response. I cannot assist. You must manage this alone. The main objective during these interactions with the demons was to avoid resonating with their vibrations while maintaining a heightened spiritual state. Michael hoped that I would become desensitized to the shock I initially experienced upon encountering these entities. Over time, I progressively managed to overcome my fear. The second type of test involved creating scenarios in which events unfolded rapidly, compelling me to make instinctive decisions. Michael referred to this as making choices based on attributes of the soul. For instance, during an earthquake, one may have seconds to decide between self-preservation or saving another person. With no time for contemplation, the decision is instinctive and immediate. Such scenarios test the quality of self-sacrifice. According to Michael, in such situations, the decision to risk oneself for the sake of another isn't a product of logical reasoning or intellectual understanding. Instead, it's an innate response because it aligns with the qualities embedded in your soul. You cannot act otherwise because this trait has become a part of your soul's identity. These attributes of the soul are the only aspects that remain with a human soul following physical death. The external mind, manifesting in the material world through the nervous system, and tuned to this world's time-space dimension, exists for the purpose of acquiring spiritual properties during physical life. Without a physical body, the state of consciousness also changes. The physical world and presence of the external mind allow us to draw conclusions through logical thinking. However, these conclusions must be internalized and become part of our core nature, transforming into spiritual qualities. Otherwise, words remain mere words, and thoughts remain thoughts, doomed to perish with the physical body. Mental demiurgy, the Sakura tree. After some time, we began to forge mental constructs in a state of altered consciousness, where the spiritual dimension is not only visible, but also susceptible to mental influence. One can fabricate an entire world, given the ability to focus thoughts and sustain the corresponding visualizations. I too created such a reality. The first element I brought into being was a tree resplendent with pink sakura blossoms, and it was breathtaking. I infused this tree with my entire sense of beauty, and around it, the rest of the world took shape. This realm was filled with an indescribable tranquility and beauty. The setting sun bathed the horizon in hues of gold and purple, and a gentle summer breeze whispered through the sakura branches, causing the petals to drift softly downward. Yet no matter how many blossoms fell, the tree remained lush. It existed in a fantastical illusion where the bounds of possibility were limitless. Beside the tree, a path meandered, bordered by fields of ripe, golden wheat. I revealed to Michael the splendor of these fields, which rippled like an ocean under the caress of the wind, and beckoned him to walk with me alongside the golden waves. The wheat, if you let it, would brush your palm in rhythmic sways, and its sun-soaked energy would seep gently into your heart, exuding warmth and nobility. Beyond, where the fields gave way to valleys and the valleys to forests, snow-capped mountains rose like ancient stoic sentinels in the distance. Look, I told Michael, it's eternal spring here. The sun's rays are always caressing your face. Here, everything is imbued with life. The sun, the earth, water, and air. You can become a water droplet, merging with a mountain stream, transforming into a rapid, and cascading joyously down to the rocky slopes below. Or you could take the form of the air, flowing with the currents, dancing amidst the wheat stalks, and rustling the branches of trees. Within these transformations, there is a gentle, mystical love for all beings you encounter, offering healing through your touch and nourishment from your soul. Imagine being the earth, sensing life awaken inside you, sprouting from your being, with all creatures drawing sustenance from your vitality. Isn't that sensation incredible? Or you can choose to be a ray of sunlight, plunging to the earth in mere seconds to bestow all your warmth. What greater gift could there be? This energy transforms into living entities, and through them, you will persist. Standing beside the sakura tree, I opened my heart to him, allowing him to see through my eyes. I felt his gaze upon me, a true seeing. There's a secure and freeing feeling that comes with having nothing to hide. When you bare your soul, they reciprocate. His spirit brushed against mine so poignantly that tears welled in my eyes. The innocence of a young child and wisdom as ancient as the world were entwined within him. A simplicity paired with an indomitable strength, standing next to me under the sakura tree, enveloped in a cascade of pink blossoms. Dear friend, I spoke, this world is my gift to you. I have never created anything more beautiful. Should we ever lose touch or face trials, we'll always have a place to reunite. Right here, under this sakura tree, another world. A certain moment brought the stark realization that our universe is unfathomably vast and intricate, much more than we typically conceive. It dawned upon me that beyond the illusory mental realms that Michael and I created for instruction and amusement, there existed genuine parallel dimensions. In these dimensions, living beings thrive and evolve, much like us in the physical world. Moreover, I discovered that traveling between these worlds is feasible through our spiritual bodies. Every day I pleaded with him to reveal another world to me, yet deep within I held little hope, for in the backdrop of the fantastical occurrences in my life, this seemed even more fantastic. During this period, life in the material realm was turning increasingly challenging. I found myself quitting my job and transitioning to a new one. The stress and tension tied to my professional life weighed heavily upon me. I noticed a pattern. Regardless of my workplace, I was always delegated tasks that were new to me or were being introduced for the first time in Georgia. Consequently, I was perpetually required to learn on the job, exploring unfamiliar territory. This peculiar trend seemed to follow me into every new venture, and shaking off this newness was invariably tied to significant effort. The cumulative burden was exhausting, both mentally and physically. Coupled with my responsibilities of giving lectures and raising children, my energy levels were nearing depletion. My legs ached from severe fatigue, and my heart sporadically troubled me. At that point, I was oblivious to the severity of this fatigue, and although I frequently complained to my family, they dismissed it as a lack of resilience on my part. The physical exhaustion and persistent stress inevitably began to impact my mental state. Repelling the negative emotions that Michael had forbidden became a Herculean task, owing to our connection, which was akin to climbers tethered together. It felt like I was continually dragging him down. This realization brought me immense grief. At times, I yearned to hide from him, to shield him from witnessing my deteriorating state. Whenever I succumbed to anger, indulged in gossip, or prioritized my materialistic desires, he experienced intense mental strain. I felt this almost physically, and found myself constantly apologizing. There came a point when I understood that things could not continue as they were. One night, I entered a state of altered consciousness and decided to reach out to a higher power. Typically, I visualized my prayers, communicating through thought forms. This time, however, I didn't know how to visualize God the Father, so I simply turned to him in my thoughts. I knew I was sincerely asking for something I least desired, but I was left with no choice. Is Michael responsible for me? No, I am the one who is responsible for him. If my connection with him causes him spiritual distress, then sever this connection and place yourself between us. It is crucial to me that he is well, and I will somehow manage on my own. Please protect me from the malevolent earthly energies emanating from me. Protect him with my love and friendship. I was deeply terrified that my plea would be heard, yet I had no other option. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling as if there was no redemption for me. In my dream, I found myself falling asleep over and over again. Above me was a star-studded sky. I walked towards the lush green grass in a teal field, struck by the vivid emerald hue of the grass in the middle of the night. I looked around, sensing that someone was waiting for me. A blonde boy who appeared to be about 10 years old stood nearby, beckoning me. Suddenly, a tricolor beam of light, akin to the northern lights, descended from the sky. The boy pointed at the pillar and announced, "If we enter this beam of light, we'll find ourselves in another world." Initially hesitant, I was soon inspired by the boy's unwavering confidence, and we entered the pillar of light. Instantly, we were transported to a strange place where the color spectrum seemed to have shifted. The sky was green and the sea was purple. Or was it the other way around? I don't recall. I remember that the colors were altered, but my eyes gradually adapted and the colors normalized. The first thing I immediately noticed was the absence of Christ's energy in this place. Pagan vibes, I thought involuntarily. I was surrounded by the sea. For some reason, I felt that this world was dominated by the element of water, and its inhabitants worshipped the gods associated with this element. Below the surface of the sea, I spotted religious structures built from circular stones, adorned with circular carvings. I gathered that the rituals honoring the water gods were somehow conducted underwater. I didn't see any people, but I did notice a rocky shore where there were runic inscriptions etched into the rock, following the contour of the stones. Only the priests here know how to read and write, the boy informed me, and then added, "You can only stay here for a few seconds. Otherwise, if you attune to the frequency of this world, it will be difficult to return." With those words, everything vanished. I seemed to awaken from a dream, once, twice, then a third time. It was incredibly challenging for me to fully rouse myself. I grappled internally for a long while before finally awakening. Upon waking, I realized that the boy was Michael, and he had fulfilled my long-standing request to show me another world. Fearful, I looked within my heart to see if my plea from the previous night had been granted and the connection had been severed. Instead, I felt waves of love emanating from him towards me, and I realized that something had changed from that day. Our connection had grown even stronger, and his demeanor towards me had become deeply personal. The phenomenon of fragmentation of consciousness. At this juncture, I entered a phase where, against all odds, whether due to my mental stress, the raw vegan diet, or the influence of my spiritual guides, I noticed a marked enhancement in my cognitive capabilities. My memory seemed sharper, learning new material became easier, and my thought processes quickened. I was able to read even the most complex books swiftly and commit each page to memory almost photographically. A peculiar incident occurred to me at work one day. Our institute boasted a beautiful veranda. We, the employees, often found solace on this veranda, taking coffee breaks and resting our weary eyes. On one such occasion, when I found myself alone in the office, I decided to retreat to the veranda to rest my eyes after hours spent squinting at the computer screen. I sat down on the bench, losing myself in the symphony of nature's sounds. The white tiles of the floor gleamed brilliantly, reflecting the sunlight. A fly lazily traversed the floor tiles, and without conscious thought, I found my gaze trailing its movements while I idly sipped my tea. Suddenly, to my surprise, I felt myself inadvertently enter the consciousness of this insect. The phenomenon unfolded spontaneously. I was taken aback to realize that I had started seeing through the fly's eyes, sensing what it was experiencing. Simultaneously, I retained a clear perception of my own self and the surrounding world. Just as before, it was as if my consciousness had split into two. One part remained within my body, while the other migrated into the body of the fly. The first sensation I perceived was that the fly lacked any conception of self-awareness. Drawn to the sunlight, as the fly, I felt myself walking towards the sunlit part of the floor, I even derived some peculiar pleasure from the movement of my insect legs. That realization jolted me, and I swiftly pulled back, extricating myself from the body of the fly. Stunned, I returned to the office, my mind whirring with a single question: what just happened? From online posts. The subsequent narrative or dream pertains to prophecy and initiation, meanings that initially escaped me. Usually my dreams unfold their meanings over time, if the stories I recount here directly pertain to my life. This period corresponds with the escalation of tension between Russia and Ukraine around 2014. As I would discover later, this dream served not only as an initiation and prophecy, but also presented a unique assignment tied to this particular political event. This task exemplifies how forces of light influence material events through intermediaries and underscores what it truly means to be endowed with Shakti and the responsibility that accompanies its usage. Autumn 2013. The initiation. In my dream, I envision a space before me, resembling a screen, segmented into 3 horizontal parts. In the lowermost segment, there is a young man garbed in a black anaphora, bearing an unhinged countenance and a sickly appearance, with a knife in his hand. In the middle segment, a middle-aged woman, attired in traditional Slavic clothing, is present. A telepathic message communicates that she is in the right. The woman is hurriedly etching an outline on the ground that I recognize as a map. Initially, I believe it to be the outline of Georgia, but it eventually takes a more rounded shape and remains incomplete to the south. In the uppermost segment, a figure resembling a steel statue, stern in expression, is seen. I am aware that this isn't a human figure, but an embodiment of divine law. This figure also draws a map, leaving it incomplete to the south. A message from this figure implies that time is running short. I shift my gaze back to the lower segment and perceive the malicious intent of the man. Reminiscent of an inquisitor, he hides behind the name of Christ, seeking vengeance. He seems to pose a threat to the woman in Slavic clothes, leading me to question whether he would harm his own mother. Suddenly, the scene transitions, and I find myself standing atop a mountain with a storm raging around me and purple clouds swirling above. There's a large wooden crucifix behind me, and to its right, 2 figures stand with their backs turned. The first figure turns around. It's the metallic man again, now with 2 heads. Each head ejects a metallic, more golden copper egg from its mouth and offers it to me. The second figure then turns around. He appears human, and although I cannot recognize him, I instinctively know him. He hands me an object akin to a pen. Confused, I ask what is expected of me. What should I do? But at that moment, I awaken. I am certain that this dream is significant and serves as a kind of mission. However, I do not understand its meaning. I recount it to my friends, speculating that the map depicts righteous people marked by God. But who are these righteous individuals? Unable to decipher the meaning, I eventually forget the dream. Several months later, as the Russia-Ukraine war commences, and the news consistently features a map of Ukraine, highlighting Crimea in red, I recognize the map from my dream. I understand why its contour was enclosed to the south. I realize that the inquisitor, dressed in the anaphora, symbolizes Russia, while the woman in Slavic attire represents Ukraine. The saying, "Kiev is the mother of Russian cities," helps me comprehend the relationship between the young man and the middle-aged woman. I anticipate that Ukraine will lose Crimea, but I'm left wondering why this dream was shown to me. What am I expected to do? Moreover, what does the second part of this dream signify? I realize that these symbols hold meaning for me alone, and no one else can interpret them for me. The task of discovering their true meaning is solely mine. 2014, the beast number 666. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine unfolds amidst relentless propaganda from Russian mass media. These communications employ familiar strategies to justify Russia's military actions, engendering hatred towards Ukrainians amongst the Russian population, despite the genetic and cultural similarities of these nations. In a dream, I observe Russia from above, perceiving dark energy generated by hatred, suspended over the country like a looming black cloud. Hate, being the antithesis of love, mirrors its properties, but in a negative form. It possesses an intense unifying force and proliferates like a virus. Subsequently, the engendered hatred solidifies into a singular state, forming a unified field. Unexpectedly, I see a counter-like device atop Russia, its numbers oscillating around 666. The scene transitions, revealing fascist Germany, Hitler's speech, and the extraordinary unity of the German nation, also suffused with the energy of hatred and displaying the revolving number 666. 666 is the lowest frequency of consciousness, comes the mental message, explaining the foretold inscription of this number on foreheads and hands, indicating thought and action driven by this particular consciousness. All living beings possess a unique frequency scale of consciousness. Frequencies below 666 are animalistic, governed by instincts, without a comparable display of free will and intellect as humans possess. Humans operating at a frequency of 666 exhibit animalistic consciousness, hence the label, the number of the beast. The subtle world abides by its subtle physical laws. When reduced to this frequency, consciousness transitions to collective management. This collective mind is well seen in, for example, bees and ants, less commonly seen in highly developed animals such as the dog or dolphin. But this category is still characterized by the phenomenon of collective mind, which is why free will in animals is either absent at all or at a germinal level. When human consciousness descends to this frequency, individual free will diminishes. The collective mind, as ordained by divine laws or instincts, is disregarded, rendering such individuals easily manipulated by others and the living demonic entities inhabiting the astral world, the subtle material dimension. These entities thrive on reducing human consciousness to the beast level, as individuals in this state lose their thinking capacity, becoming readily manipulable, whilst emitting substantial negative energy, providing nourishment for these entities. It is an all too familiar scenario when individuals lose their thinking capacity in the throes of intense anger and hatred. Even secular law takes this affective state into consideration when sentencing convicts. A drop to 666 on an individual level typically occurs momentarily, but if it spreads across an entire nation, it becomes extremely perilous. Therefore, it is a heinous crime to instill hatred at a national level, regardless of its direction. No righteous anger or righteous hate can be justified, as they invariably result in low-frequency emissions, harmful to both the emitter and the recipient of these emotions. As I previously mentioned, the frequency scale up to 666 is of animalistic nature. It does not manifest free will or significant individual thought, the human frequency of mental field vibration scale begins at 666, with the upper limit yet unknown to me. Within this range, the development of individual will and intellect is unveiled, starting from an intuitive upper limit, presumably 999, the consciousness scale of exalted living beings begins. This scale also has ascending ranges, with each segment corresponding to a distinct type of being. I only understand that beyond 999, individual free will ceases to exist as the being aligns its will with God's will. This alignment isn't instinctive, but rather a voluntary choice. It does not imply the loss of individuality, at least not in the initial stages. I once asked Michael, "What does it mean to act according to God's will?" He replied, "It's like riding a wave." He conveyed this through a visual image of a surfer catching and riding a wave. The highest frequency of human consciousness emanates the energy of love, which is the strongest unifying force. The sensation of love transforms both the subject experiencing it and the object of their affection, uniting them to such an extent that their karmas merge. However, love is often confused with possessiveness. Genuine love is an incredibly freeing emotion. It radiates outwards without any ego-driven inward pull. You love someone not for your sake, but for theirs. Your intention is solely their happiness, regardless of whether it involves you. True love expects nothing in return and offers freely. Hence, it never induces misery or suffering, instead serving as a conduit to the highest form of liberation. Any feelings of jealousy or resentment point towards distorted love and imperfect energy. At the pinnacle of the human consciousness scale, human consciousness radiates love energy as it expands. This energy envelops humans and all beings in a state of expanded consciousness, engendering a sensation of loving unity with them. This radiation propels a person towards the realm of supernatural beings. The evolution of all living beings can be described by the principle of ascension on this scale. The elevation of consciousness is the sole objective. The energy of Christ. As the war in Ukraine continues, we all are keeping tabs on the developments. Despite my apolitical nature, I am terribly annoyed by the president of the Russians and his politics. Although this emotion is taboo for me, P is the sole person towards whom I harbor feelings that can mildly be described as unchristian. Suddenly, a telepathic message arrives suggesting I pray specifically for him, as well as for Russia. For in this conflict, Russia stands on the darker side, spiritually estranged. For several months, I tried convincing myself that P too is human, and if I could bless the devil, refer to strange dream with prophecy, I should be capable of extending the same to him. But I was unsuccessful. The sense of injustice at Russia's interference with smaller, weaker nations like Georgia and Ukraine, its annexation of territories, and its indifference towards the killing struck me. It was as if all accusations against Russia rolled off it like water off a duck's back. Russian idiom. Don't consider this from materialistic perspectives. I heard Michael's voice once more. You know that in essence, injustice doesn't exist. One day, in the solitude of my room, I knelt before my personally painted smiling Christ icon and decided to conduct a prayer. Closing my eyes, I prepared myself to connect with the Russian collective consciousness, or egregore, by listening to a poignant wartime Russian song. While this choice might seem odd to some, it stirs strong emotions in me, given my half-Russian heritage, which I believed would enable me to perceive this egregore. As I slipped into an altered state of consciousness, memories of my childhood in Russia surfaced. Images of vast fields dotted with birch trees, which I adored as a child. Blooming meadows blanketed with raspberry bushes and mushrooms, and expansive landscapes interwoven with forests flooded my mind. For a fleeting moment, I could almost perceive the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. The vast open spaces, incomparable to anything I'd experienced in Georgia, invoked a profound sense of an immense, unseen homeland. It was as if I could hear my grandmother's voice beckoning me to partake in freshly baked pies, a memory so vivid it brought tears to my eyes. The Russian egregore felt like a sharp knife slicing into my heart, invoking a surge of profound pain. It seemed like a thin fabric of energy blanketing the country. Having recognized Christ's spiritual energy, or Shakti, after my encounter with him, I started praying to Jesus, invoking his energy. Concurrently, I visually elevated the Russian egregore and linked it with Christ's energy. I'm not sure why, but I visualized securing the point of connection with the tip of a symbolic knife. Suddenly, I saw a wave of Christ energy emanating from the connection point, sweeping across Russia like the wave from an atomic bomb. It left in its wake a destruction reminiscent of an explosion's aftermath. I could hardly believe my sight. How could such divine power, Christ energy, precipitate destruction? What I had witnessed and what was destroyed didn't belong to the material world. They seemed to be subtle world constructs, potentially dark structures akin to those in black magic. Even now, I am uncertain about what transpired and hope I didn't do anything inappropriate. I was left with a single question. How did I know what to do? Or did what I perform actually work? Intriguingly, I feel I possess such knowledge on a different level of consciousness, which I am unable to fully bring into the physical realm. The significance of the second part of the dream, see above, initiation, only revealed itself to me after some time. The occurrence at the summit of the mountain, marked by the crucifix, served as a form of initiation. The man of steel symbolized karma, or, in a wider context, divine law. The two eggs, each launched from the head, embodied the capacity to discern two realms, the physical and the spiritual, even though I might refer to the spiritual as the subtler physical dimensions. The other man, bearing a strong resemblance to the Savior, appeared to be my primary spiritual guide, likely Michael, and he bestowed something upon me, a later addition. It turned out to be the right to write. December 2014, encountering a dark sorcerer in Istanbul. In a dream, I find myself confronting a human soul directly before me. Somehow, I just know that this soul belongs to a black mage, likely a man. The sight is horrendous, a black, formless, repulsive, amorphous mass. As I looked at it, I could see each of his transgressions, all the suffering he'd inflicted on people, all the evil deeds he'd committed. Each of his sins had accumulated as black energy on his spiritual body, which was undoubtedly infused with strong demonic energy. Driven by instinct, I began to pray to Jesus, directing the energy of my prayer towards the spirit. Although a desire for revenge momentarily stirred within me, I dismissed it. I shaped the energy of my prayer into a stream and directed it at the dark spirit. The soul seemed to solidify, deforming and shrinking in response. Suddenly, As though sprouting from the ground, a young boy appeared before me. I can still recall how he looked, dressed in jeans and a red cap. He lashed out at me in anger, hurling harsh accusations. Do you possess such power, yet know not how to wield it? Who is your master? Embarrassed, I found myself at a loss for words. We do not kill anyone, he continued. We either expel them or restore them. Now they will have the right to claim life for life. I was stunned, particularly by his final words. Was I killing someone? Behind me, I heard the murmuring of two men, as if they were observers commenting on my actions. One of them remarked calmly to the other, "She's not ready yet. We must take the power from her, else she'll harm herself." I woke up with a dreadful feeling that I'd made a grave mistake, that I'd done something terribly wrong. I tried to reassure myself that it was only a dream, but my dreams are rarely just dreams. I continued to ponder what could be wrong with me. Eventually, I concluded that the energy or power of prayer should not be directed at a single entity, but rather diffused in the surroundings to elevate the overall vibrational level of the environment. I implored Michael and Jesus for another chance, promising to act more wisely next time. The entire day was dominated by a terrible mood and a disheartening lack of energy. We, with my family, roamed the shops in Taksim, but neither the shopping spree nor the city's vibrance brought any joy. I tried to ignore my sullen demeanor, pretending to be engrossed in the sights around me. This dream lingered on my mind throughout. The fear of imminent rejection was overwhelming. The following night, I had a dream. I lived in a house with two ladies below my floor, a mother and her daughter. I would often encounter them on the stairs, but always one at a time, never together. One day, I bumped into the mother in the hallway. She invited me for tea. Out of neighborly courtesy, I agreed and joined her in her apartment. We sat at a small round table adorned with a vintage-style lace napkin, on top of which stood exquisite chinaware. As she served the tea, I looked around, wondering about her daughter. When I asked about her, she replied that she was home alone, as usual. Suddenly, a familiar sensation gripped me, a chilling cold creeping under my skin, and the encroachment of a dense, dark force. I turned abruptly to the woman, meeting her eyes squarely. I was confident that the entity before me was a witch, appearing sometimes as the old lady, and at other times as her daughter, but in reality, the same being. The witch seemed to realize that I had seen through her disguise. We faced off, our gaze locked in tension. I started to pray, my usual weapon, but remembered not to direct the prayer's energy at her, instead, trying to distribute it throughout the room. To my dismay, I realized that my prayer was void of power. It was just empty words. Feeling vulnerable and flustered, I pulled back, unsure of my next move. Which, sensing my predicament, regained her former sweet demeanor and taunted me. "See? You're powerless. Perhaps we could negotiate," she suggested. I replied, stating that there was nothing I wished to discuss with her. This remark seemed to infuriate her further. Overcome with anger, she gestured wildly, hurling me into a void resembling a black hole. It was a place of absolute darkness where an infinite fall awaited me. There, I was falling into this bottomless abyss. Fear, however, didn't take hold. I was confident that Michael would not abandon me. As I waited, a remarkable sight unfolded. Against the absolute blackness, a fiery angel materialized. His brilliant, shining form seemed even more luminous amidst the darkness. It was the first time I had seen him in such a fiery form. He reached out and grasped my hand. For a fleeting moment, just for a brief instant, it felt as though my hand turned slightly fiery where we touched, and his hand became slightly human. Was it my imagination? Then everything faded away, and... My friends and I are heading to the mall. Nina needs to buy some jeans. At this point, I awaken and begin to reflect on the events that transpired. Despite the power of prayer being seemingly withdrawn from me, I know that Michael will not abandon me. Whatever may occur, he will never leave my side. It's challenging to articulate this kind of connection between souls, a bond stronger than any known to us. It's not merely friendship, respect, or adoration. I believe it's even greater than love. It's a bond so profound that it might compel one's beloved soul to venture into hell. Michael didn't turn away from me, and I felt this unequivocally. From that day forward, our connection only deepened. For a considerable amount of time, I lacked the power to pray. This power had been withdrawn from me due to my improper motivation and my inability to arrive at a completely accurate conclusion. As Michael would later explain to me, when a person becomes a conduit for a specific type of divine energy, which I refer to as the power of prayers, Shakti, they are obligated to always utilize this energy with a sacred motivation. There exist various types of energies. Both these energies and the spirits that carry them possess corresponding attributes. For instance, Christ's energy has certain characteristics that require a person to avoid certain emotional states, such as fear, a desire for revenge, and any form of selfish desires when using it. Otherwise, this energy becomes distorted and falls into demonic domains. Generally, two types of distortions are most prevalent: fear and the desire for justified revenge, as happened in my case. Such distorted energy harms both the individual to whom it is directed and the one who carries this energy. This is why it is essential to maintain constant internal harmony, regardless of circumstances, to swiftly shift emotions, and to think in spiritual terms. In addition to distortion, there's also the issue of misdirection of expended energy. This typically occurs when the host soul identifies itself with a certain manifestation or egregore in the physical world, such as their country, family, or religion. Whichever egregore the incarnated soul identifies itself with, that's where its energy flows. The more narrow the egregore, the more specific the purpose it serves. The precise use of the divine energy you carry should be consciously determined by you, the bearer of this energy, Shakti Avatar. For instance, if a person has a very strong attachment to their family, the energy they spend will reflect this bond and be used within the spectrum of this specific egregore, which often isn't the intended purpose of this energy expenditure. If a person has a potent sense of national identity, their energy is directed towards their country. If someone firmly believes that their religion is the only true one, their energy is used to further this religion. All of this happens because the human soul gets entangled in the illusionary play of the material world, identifies itself with various aspects of this world, becomes attached to them, and develops a sense of ownership, like my children, my city, my country, etc. The more advanced a person's consciousness, the larger the egregore they can identify with, or completely free themselves from. For example, my planet, my humanity. Modern human consciousness has not yet expanded beyond these bounds. But a time will come when humans will not only become inhabitants and caretakers of their home planet and the cosmos, but also of other material and spiritual dimensions, Alternatively, they may entirely liberate themselves from the material and subtle worlds, merging their consciousness with all of God's manifestations. Summer 2015, my mother's illness. In the spring, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. The severity of the situation was kept from me to avoid causing me worry. One night, I had a particularly telling dream. My mother and I were in a building, the entire floor of which was covered with venomous snakes. My brother, wearing special boots, seemed fearless around these creatures. I attempted to hover above the snakes, doing my best not to fall among them. But I felt my strength diminishing, and inevitably, I landed in the midst of them. Meanwhile, my mother sat there, busily sewing boots for me. She was seemingly oblivious to the dangers around her and made no effort to avoid the snakes. I chastised her for not taking more care for her own safety while trying to protect us. Suddenly, one of the snakes bit into her leg. Filled with fear, I knew the bite could be fatal. But my mother simply laid her hand on me, downplaying the situation, saying, "It's nothing, it'll pass," and she continued sewing. Then, I noticed a protective amulet hanging on her back, something that had been her safeguard for all her life. The amulet was broken. Next, a path appeared in my dream, and a card was on the path. Inside the card sat Jesus and the Virgin Mary, with my mother seated in between them, her back to me. The card slowly drifted away, obscuring my view. Upon awakening, I had a dreadful realization. My mother wouldn't recover. August 2015, a warning of future challenges. In my dream, an unseen force grabs me and lifts me up into the sky. As I approach the clouds, I hear a voice reassuringly say, "Don't be afraid. Nothing terrible will happen." Autumn 2015, Tbilisi, the passing of my mother, and the concept of aerial toll houses. In October, my mother succumbed to complications from chemotherapy. By this time, my own health had deteriorated significantly. Severe weakness in my legs made walking a challenge, and every movement required a tremendous effort. My heart was under strain, and breathing was difficult. The distress associated with my mother's passing further exacerbated my condition. I remember spending the initial days after her death at my parents' home. Before 40 days had passed, I experienced two poignant dreams. In the first dream, I found myself entering an old apartment in Sololaki. My mother was alone in a small, dark bedroom, a room she'd always disliked due to its lack of light and cramped conditions. The apartment was empty and dim, imbued with the somber mood of the 90s. She lay there, aged, gray, alone, and forgotten, swathed in several blankets in an attempt to stay warm. "I want you to leave this place," I said. "You all want me to leave. You don't love me," she retorted angrily. "You need to go with Christ," I insisted before waking up. The second dream unfolded differently. We were in a large, bright house surrounded by a verdant landscape of trees and flowers. My mother was in the kitchen, young and beautiful, bustling about. The kitchen had large, bright windows, just as she had always dreamed of. The house was full of guests, many of whom seemed to be my mother's relatives. My mother was lively and jovial. She wore an apron and was pulling a freshly baked cake from the oven. The scent of the cake mingled with the warm, comforting ambiance of family. Yet for reasons unknown, I found myself saying to her, "You must leave this place as well." My mother seemed to ignore my words, focusing on her task at hand. "You need to go with Jesus. Everything that has ever been, will be, or could be, exists there." I woke up puzzling over that phrase. It was a type of thought I'd never had before, not even in a dream. I only understood that after the death of the physical body, a person's consciousness changes. It can fall into illusory traps caused by deep-seated fears or unfulfilled desires, both of which tether the individual to the earthly world with unseen bonds. 2016 to 2017, a deluge of difficulties. The year 2016 slipped by almost unnoticed. I seldom saw my spiritual guides in my dreams anymore, and my waking hours were consumed by medical treatments and a battle for my health. Despite everything, I never lost the sensation of being continuously connected with them. Whenever I thought of Michael or Jesus, I felt their enduring love, which I returned in kind. This love served as my lifeline, my thread of Ariadne, unbroken even during the darkest, most challenging days and nights, even when I saw nothing ahead but despair, disability, and pain. I found myself losing control of my consciousness. Negative thoughts raced incessantly through my head, with grim events constantly unfolding before my eyes. I was haunted by a relentless stream of past hurts, remembering every negative incident that had ever happened to me. It was as if all the trauma that had built up over the course of my life was surfacing, relentless and suffocating. Despite my best efforts to hide my illness from my family, I am not certain if I succeeded. There was rarely a day without tears. Sometimes they flowed involuntarily, even when I wasn't crying. My youngest son's health also began to deteriorate, adding to my burden. Decisions needed to be made, yet my mind was in a constant whirl, making focused thought near impossible. I pleaded with God to confine this misfortune to me alone and spare my children and husband from its fallout. Within just a year, I felt like I'd lost everything: my health, my job, my role as a mother, and as a wife. There were days and months where getting out of bed was an insurmountable task, and even when I managed to, I could barely navigate the room with the aid of a cane or crutches. I could no longer give my children and husband the attention they deserved. There were moments when life itself felt unbearable. I didn't want to live anymore, yet it was the thought of my children that stopped me from succumbing to despair. One night, Michael appeared in my dream, this time in the form of a young man. "Do you want me to take you?" he asked. "You know I'm not ready and can't leave my family," I replied, a bit confused, and then woke up. Autumn 2016, a glimpse into a previous incarnation. My husband and I have been debating about the concept of soul reincarnation. As an Orthodox Christian, he doesn't delve much into such matters and aligns with the Church's position. Given his indifference, I humorously suggested, "Well, I will dream about your past life and then tell you about it." I didn't take my word seriously at that moment, but surprisingly, I had a dream about it. I found myself standing beside a well. A woman, clad in black, stood in front of me, gesturing towards the well and instructing, "Jump into this well. Instead of water, you'll find a tunnel inside. This tunnel will lead you to a small wooden door. If you open that door, you can see the past life of anyone you desire." Embracing her words, I leapt into the well. From its depths, a narrow, dark, curving tunnel emerged. I moved headfirst through this moss-laden passage, damp and burrow-like, until I reached a small wooden door. As I prepared to open it, a thought occurred. Since my husband doesn't show interest in his past life, maybe I should explore mine. Keeping this thought in mind, I open the door and step into a sun-drenched field. The brilliant sun causes me to squint. The landscape is blanketed with fields of lush green grass. I see myself as a young man. I have the same hair and eyes. I note to myself. I'm aware that I'm English. Looks like it's 19th century. I belong to a high-ranking English aristocratic family with colonies in India. This time, I am in India. I sprint across the field and notice a crowd gathering on the opposite side. It's a royal tiger hunt. Elegantly attired ladies sit under parasols, exchanging pleasantries. Nearby stand elephants adorned in vibrant costumes with their Indian caretakers, also donned in colorful traditional attire. The grandeur of the gathering is palpable. The British aristocracy has assembled. My family is amongst them, but a glimpse of them fills my heart with melancholy and ennui. I know I have a guru somewhere, and I feel an urge to run towards him. The image then fades, and I sense that after the death of my physical body, and before being born in my current life, my soul is engaged in a conversation, attempting to prove something. A voice responds to me. You will be born into unfavorable conditions. You will be a woman born in a country where God is absent. If you succeed in understanding your true essence, then... At this point, the dream ends, and I wake up. What astonishes me most is the reference to Georgia, a deeply religious country, as godless. Yet considering that it was a communist country when I was born, it was indeed atheistic. Was the vision I saw in my dream accurate? Could it be that my affection for Europe and India, and for Christianity and the Vedas, indeed originate from a previous life? 2016. The Star. In my dream, I find myself walking through a field. Above me, the night sky sparkles with countless stars. One star directly overhead twinkles with exceptional vibrancy, spinning as if striving to catch my attention. I halt and ask, "How can I find God?" The star responds, "Look within your heart. How can I talk to God?" "Look within your heart," he answers again. I bow my head, somewhat expecting this response, and reply with a touch of irritation, "In my heart, I only see myself." Continuing my journey, the path becomes steeper as I climb a mountain. It's as if I've walked this trail many times before. I instinctively know where to go, scrambling over rocks, tracing narrow paths along precipices, and nearly falling into a ravine do not deter me. Despite the obstacles, I press on, undaunted. I enter a fog so thick that visibility is limited to just a few steps ahead. I navigate blindly but with confidence, until suddenly, the fog clears, revealing an incredible sight. Before me lies an enchanting vista unlike anything I've ever seen or imagined. It's as though everything is suspended in midair. People, animals, even trees. The sky is painted with vibrant hues. The setting sun scatters a myriad of diamond-like rays, casting a magical interplay of light and shadow. This indescribable beauty deeply moves me, bringing tears to my eyes. A man dressed in white stands before me. I think to myself, is this the star that was speaking to me? Could this be God? "Why are you crying? Are you cold?" the man in white asks in a jesting tone. "No," I respond. I'm just so happy to be here. December 2017, a dream interpretation of illness. One day, my condition worsened again, resulting in a long period of decline and a renewed bout of despair and hopelessness. I couldn't comprehend why I was afflicted with an intractable disease that could neither be diagnosed nor treated. During one of those difficult nights, I prayed to God, seeking understanding of why this was happening to me and what I should do. That night, I had a dream. Its meaning eluded me at the time, and the content of the dream perplexed me greatly. I may not have noted down all of its details, but I have vowed to be truthful and share everything. So I'll describe this dream as well. I'm hosting a party at home. It seems I've created a portrait of Shiva, an Indian deity, which for some reason I need to present to the guests. These guests are strangers who, paradoxically, I seem to know well. We're all assembled, merely awaiting Shiva's arrival. He too is an invited guest. The portrait of him has gone missing, which causes me significant distress. Suddenly, a group of butterflies fly into the room. People try to shoo them away, but I intervene. I explain to the guests that this is Shiva. He enjoys taking the form of butterflies. Suddenly, the scene shifts, and I see Shiva himself. As if to apologize, he approaches a woman who is his soulmate. She, angered by something, transforms into the energy of rage and descends to the earth. Then I see myself being bitten by a rather nasty-looking insect. It leaves its stinger in my thumb. The gathered guests set me in a chair and encircle me. Initially, the sting doesn't bother me, but it gradually begins to cause pain and immense discomfort. Moreover, the idea of a foreign body within me is psychologically unsettling, and I make every effort to remove the stinger. At one point, I even succeed, but instead of celebrating, my guests look at me with disappointment and surprise. Weren't you supposed to endure? Have you forgotten? Didn't we create all the comforts for you? Is it so unbearable? I wake up feeling bewildered and disoriented. Is this the answer to my question? What does Shiva signify here? And for some reason, I'm reminded of that black butterfly, which had landed so persistently on my hand. (2017) Medicinal plants. In my dream, it appears as though Christ is leading me through nature. We traverse lush meadows blanketed in flowers, with him seemingly following something within the plants. I look closely at the flowers and discover that each plant is enveloped in an aura of various colors. Soon after, I find myself in my bedroom, where I notice a bottle of one of my herbal remedies, emitting a distinct blue glow. After this, I begin to see the auras of people as well. Their radiance manifests in different colors within different parts of them. Christ starts to speak to me about herbal treatments, but I feel overwhelmed and somewhat lost. Only fragmented images from the dream remain in my consciousness as I wake up. 2017, the dream foretelling the year of my death. I had a dream in which my aunt was reading my biography aloud. However, this biography was utterly different and peculiar. Instead of detailing the events and dates of my physical life, it depicted my good and bad deeds from a spiritual perspective. The biography began with the words, "This ancient soul, servant of the Lord, reincarnated into the world in the autumn of 1976. I couldn't recall the Lord's name. All I remember is that it wasn't a name we were familiar with. The biography then proceeded to describe my spiritual deeds, both good and bad. At some point, I realized that the biography had passed the year 2017 and was nearing its conclusion, right up to the date of my passing. The biography ended with the words, "And she departed from the world in the autumn of 2004. I am intentionally not writing the specific year here. I recall waking up and quickly calculating the ages of my children at that time, and I felt somewhat relieved. Winter, 2017, the Om Mantra. My little son and I are seated next to Jesus. I explain to him that I often recite the Jesus prayer in rhythm with my heartbeat, but I'm unable to feel it resonate in my heart. I ask him for guidance on this matter. He responds, "Exhale with a sound and focus on your heart. However, don't expect immediate results. It takes some time to feel the energy." As he shares this advice, I instinctively understand his meaning. Upon awakening, I put his guidance into practice and realize that my natural exhalation with a vocal sound mirrors the Om mantra. After a few months of consistent practice, I start to truly feel as though my heart chakra is being cleansed and energized by the sound of Om. A subtle vibration permeates my entire body, particularly noticeable in my hands. It feels as if an energy cloud is vibrating around my body. Depending on the day, I may practice for 15 minutes or up to an hour. Following each session, I notice an astonishing clarity of mind and heightened energy level, a much-needed remedy for my chronic lack of energy. I've come to refer to this practice as cleansing the heart. Prior to each session, I address God with these words: "Father, cleanse my heart, synchronize my soul and body." As I draw breath, I mentally affirm, "I am with God," and while exhaling, I chant the Om mantra, focusing intently on my heart. 2017, the right to a single request. Despite my consistent prayers, spiritual devotion, yoga practices, and various treatments, I remained physically frail with no significant improvement in sight. This situation periodically sent me spiraling into bouts of profound depression and despair. Another 6 months passed in a cycle of visiting doctors and experimenting with numerous treatments, none of which proved effective or provided any lasting relief. In fact, my condition would always revert back to an even more severe state. One evening, while I sat at my desk and entertained yet another gloomy thought, a firm resolve sparked within me. I could at least once ask something for myself, from God. Somehow, I felt I had earned this single request. Without much deliberation, it dawned on me that what I yearned for was neither the restoration of my health nor a return to my old life, but an encounter with Michael. The absence of our interactions and discussions weighed heavily on my heart. I believed that such a meeting would shine a ray of hope into my seemingly hopeless existence, rekindling my former self. I yearned to create expressions of beauty and joy, as he had taught me, and offer them to him as a gift of gratitude. Unfortunately, my clouded and fatigued mind had lost the ability to see and hear him. Nevertheless, I held on to the hope that with the aid of supernatural forces, this desired encounter might become possible. So I inscribed my request on a piece of paper and set it aflame, allowing the energy of the fire to transport my plea to the necessary realm.